Hello, friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. The rain had been falling steadily for 3 days straight when the call came through. It was April in Oregon, and the constant drizzle had turned every back road into a muddy mess. I'd been a state trooper for 12 years by that point, and I thought I'd seen everything the job had to offer. But that Tuesday afternoon in 2019, sitting in my cruiser on Highway 26 just outside of Portland, I was about to learn how wrong I was. My name is Blake Morrison, and I've spent most of my career patrolling the rural stretches of Oregon's highways. The job usually involves traffic stops, accident responses, and the occasional domestic dispute call. Nothing that would keep you up at night. Nothing that would make you question whether you should have taken that desk job your wife keeps mentioning. The dispatcher's voice crackled through my radio at 3:47 p.m. Unit 47. We have a missing person report requiring immediate response. Possible welfare check needed. I picked up the handset. Unit 47 responding. What's the situation? Caller is reporting her sister hasn't been seen for 4 days. Family is at the residence now. They're requesting law enforcement presence before entering the property. The address was about 20 minutes from my position, a rural property off Cedar Creek Road. I'd driven past it countless times, but never had reason to stop. As I made my way there, the dispatcher provided more details. The missing woman was Amanda Reeves, 34 years old, lived alone after a recent divorce. Her sister had been trying to reach her since Friday with no response. When she drove by the house that morning, Amanda's car was in the driveway, but nobody answered the door. The rain intensified as I turned onto Cedar Creek Road. The windshield wipers struggled to keep up, creating brief moments of clarity before the glass blurred again. Something about the call felt off already. 4 days was a long time, but adults have the right to disappear if they want to. Still, the family's insistence on police presence before entering suggested they suspected something was wrong. The Reeves property sat at the end of a long gravel driveway, surrounded by dense Oregon forest. The house itself was modest, a single-story ranch style that had seen better days. The paint was peeling, and the gutters were overflowing with rainwater. Amanda's blue Honda Civic sat in the driveway, just as reported. 3 people stood on the covered porch, huddled together against the rain. As I parked and approached, I could see the family resemblance immediately. The woman in the middle, who I assumed was the sister who'd called, stepped forward. "Officer, thank God you're here. I'm Patricia, Amanda's sister. This is our brother Michael and Amanda's ex-husband Keith." Keith's presence immediately raised a red flag. Recent divorce, ex-husband at the scene, missing woman. The pattern was all too familiar. "Ma'am, I'm Trooper Morrison. Can you tell me exactly when you last had contact with your sister?" Patricia wiped rain from her face, though we were under the porch cover. Friday morning, she texted me that she wasn't feeling well and was going to take a few days off work, but she hasn't answered any calls or texts since then. That's not like her at all. I looked at Keith. He was a large man, probably 6'3", with the build of someone who worked construction. His hands were stuffed in his jacket pockets, and he avoided eye contact. "Mr. Reeves, when did you last see Amanda?" "It's Henderson now," he corrected. I went back to my maiden name after the divorce, and I haven't seen Amanda in 2 weeks. We're not exactly on speaking terms. But you're here now, I observed. Patricia interjected. I called him. I thought maybe Amanda had mentioned something to him. Or maybe, I don't know, I'm just worried. I studied the house. All the curtains were drawn, unusual for the middle of the day. No lights were visible from inside despite the gray afternoon making it quite dark. Have any of you tried to enter the residence? No, Patricia said quickly. The door's locked. We have a spare key, but... She trailed off, looking uncomfortable. But what? Michael spoke for the first time. There's a smell. When you get close to the door, there's definitely a smell. My hand instinctively moved to my radio. A smell after 4 days usually meant one thing. But I needed to assess the situation properly first. All right, I'm going to need you all to wait here while I check the perimeter. Do not attempt to enter the house until I give the all clear. I walked around the house, checking windows and looking for any signs of forced entry. Everything appeared secure. The back door was also locked. But Michael was right about the smell. Even in the rain, there was an unmistakable odor coming from inside. Not quite what I expected, though. It wasn't the smell of decomposition. It was something else. Something chemical. Returning to the front, I made a decision. Patricia, I'll need that spare key. She handed it over with shaking fingers. Do you think she's... Let's not jump to conclusions. I need you all to stay back on the porch. I inserted the key and turned it slowly. The lock clicked open. I pushed the door slightly and called out, Amanda Reeves. This is the Oregon State Police. I'm coming in to check on your welfare. No response. The smell hit me full force as I opened the door wider. It was definitely chemical, like cleaning products mixed with something else. Something burnt. I drew my flashlight, keeping my other hand near my weapon. The living room was dark, but nothing seemed out of place. Furniture was arranged normally, no signs of struggle. But the smell was stronger as I moved deeper into the house. Amanda? State Police. Please respond if you can hear me. I moved through the hallway, checking the bathroom first. Empty. The smell seemed to be coming from further back, possibly the bedroom area. As I approached the master bedroom, I noticed something odd. Towels had been stuffed under the door, sealing the gap. My pulse quickened. This was deliberate. Someone had tried to contain something in that room. I pulled the towels away and tried the door handle, locked from the inside. Now I had a decision to make. This was looking more and more like a potential crime scene, but if Amanda was inside and needed medical attention, every second counted. Amanda, I'm going to enter the room. State Police. I stepped back and kicked hard near the lock. The door frame splintered but held. Another kick and it burst open. The scene inside stopped me cold. The room had been transformed into something I'd never seen before. Plastic sheets covered every surface, the walls, the floor, the ceiling. In the center of the room was a camping cot, and on it lay Amanda Reeves. She was unconscious but breathing, an IV drip attached to her arm, the bag hanging from a makeshift stand. But that wasn't the disturbing part. The walls beneath the plastic were covered in writing. Hundreds, maybe thousands of words, written in what looked like black marker. And sitting in a chair next to the cot, watching Amanda sleep, was an elderly woman I'd never seen before. She looked up at me with the calmest expression I'd ever seen. "Hello, officer. I've been expecting you." I had my weapon drawn before I'd even processed the movement. Hands where I can see them. "Who are you?" The woman slowly raised her hands. She had to be in her 70s, thin and frail-looking, wearing a floral dress that belonged in a different decade. My name is Dorothy Millhouse. I live next door. I've been taking care of Amanda. Taking care of her? What did you do to her? Dorothy smiled, and something about that smile made my skin crawl. I saved her, officer. From them, from what they were planning to do to her. I kept my weapon trained on her while reaching for my radio with my other hand. Dispatch, Unit 47. I need backup and medical immediately at my location. Possible kidnapping and false imprisonment. Patricia's voice carried from the front door. Officer? Is everything okay? Is Amanda? Stay back, I shouted. Then to Dorothy, on the ground now. Hands behind your back. Dorothy complied slowly, her movements deliberate and careful. As I cuffed her, she spoke quietly. You should read what's on the walls, officer. You should know what they were planning. What they've done before. I looked at the writing beneath the plastic. Names, dates, locations. It looked like some kind of timeline or list. But I had more pressing concerns. I checked Amanda's pulse. Steady but weak. The fourth bag was labeled with medical terminology I didn't recognize. Whatever Dorothy had been giving her, it had kept her unconscious for days. Backup arrived within minutes, followed closely by paramedics. As they worked on Amanda, carefully removing the IV and preparing her for transport, I stood in the doorway, trying to make sense of the scene. Detective Sarah Kim arrived about 20 minutes later. She took one look at the room and whistled low. What the hell happened here, Blake? I explained what I'd found. Dorothy's strange comments about them and what they were planning. Sarah studied the writing on the walls, taking photos. This is extensive. Some of these dates go back years, and these names... She paused, her expression changing. Blake, I recognize some of these names. These are missing persons cases. Cold cases from all over Oregon. The implication hung in the air between us. I looked back at the porch where Keith, Patricia, and Michael were being interviewed by other officers. They looked confused, scared, but also something else. Relief, or was I imagining it? Sarah, Dorothy said she was protecting Amanda from them. She was looking at the family when she said it. Sarah nodded slowly. We'll need to process everything, every word on these walls, and we'll need to interview everyone extensively. She paused, including Dorothy. Especially Dorothy. As the paramedics wheeled Amanda out on a stretcher, still unconscious, I noticed Keith watching intently. His expression was hard to read, but there was something in his eyes that made me uneasy. When he caught me looking, he quickly turned away. Dorothy was being led to a patrol car, but she stopped and looked directly at me. Check the basement at the old Franklin property, 1847 Franklin Road. You'll understand then. The officer escorting her urged her forward, but her words stuck with me. There was no fear in her eyes, no regret, just a strange sense of satisfaction, as if everything was going according to plan. I made a note of the address she'd mentioned. Something told me this was far from over. The rain continued to fall as we processed the scene, washing away any exterior evidence but unable to touch the disturbing tableau inside that plastic-covered room. Patricia approached me as I was heading back to my cruiser. Officer Morrison, is Amanda going to be okay? The paramedics think so, I replied, studying her face. But I have to ask, did Amanda mention anything to you recently about feeling threatened? Anyone she was afraid of? Patricia hesitated just a moment too long. No, nothing like that. She'd been acting paranoid lately, since the divorce. She thought people were watching her. What people? I don't know. She wouldn't say. I thought it was just the stress of everything. Keith joined us, his large frame casting a shadow despite the gray day. Amanda always had an active imagination, he said. Even when we were married, she'd get these ideas in her head. What kind of ideas? I pressed. Keith shrugged. Conspiracy theories. She spent too much time online, reading about missing persons cases, human trafficking. She became obsessed with it. It's part of why we divorced. I found it interesting that he was already trying to discredit anything Amanda might say when she woke up. Were you aware of Dorothy Milhouse before today? Both Keith and Patricia shook their heads. Michael had disappeared, I noticed. When I asked about him, Patricia said he'd gone home, feeling sick from the smell. As I drove away from the scene, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd only seen the tip of something much larger. Dorothy's words echoed in my mind, from what they were planning to do to her. What exactly had the old woman prevented? And why did I have the unsettling feeling that Amanda's family knew more than they were letting on? The next several hours were a blur of activity. Amanda was transported to Portland General, still unconscious but stable. The crime scene techs arrived and began the meticulous process of documenting everything in that plastic-covered room. I stayed on scene, unable to shake the feeling that we were missing something crucial. Dorothy had been taken to the station for questioning, but not before she looked directly at me and said it again. Check the basement at the old Franklin property, 1847 Franklin Road. You'll understand then. I'd made a note of it, but there were more immediate concerns. The family members were being interviewed separately, and their stories weren't quite lining up. Patricia claimed she'd last heard from Amanda on Friday morning, but phone records showed a call between them on Saturday afternoon that lasted 12 minutes. When confronted with this, Patricia became flustered. I forgot. Yes, we talked Saturday. She sounded strange, paranoid. She kept saying someone was watching her house. And you didn't think to check on her immediately? Detective Kim pressed. She'd been saying things like that for weeks. I thought she was having a breakdown from the divorce stress. I told her to see a therapist. Michael's story was even more inconsistent. He initially said he hadn't been to Amanda's house in months, but a neighbor reported seeing his truck there the previous Sunday. Okay, yes, I drove by, he finally admitted when presented with this information. I was worried, but I didn't stop. The house looked dark, and I figured she didn't want to be bothered. Just drove by? I asked. The neighbor said your truck was parked there for at least 20 minutes. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I sat there for a while, trying to decide if I should knock. But Amanda and we haven't been close lately. Not since she started with all her theories. What theories? She thought our family was involved in something. Something criminal. It was insane. She accused Keith of being part of some kidnapping ring. Can you believe that? But it was Keith's interview that raised the most red flags. Detective Kim had taken the lead on his questioning, and I watched from behind the one-way mirror. Keith was nervous, sweating despite the cool temperature in the interview room. Mr. Henderson, you said you hadn't seen Amanda in 2 weeks, but we have a witness who saw you arguing with her in the Walmart parking lot last Wednesday. Keith's jaw clenched. That wasn't an argument. We just ran into each other. We talked for a few minutes. The witness described it as heated, said Amanda was crying. She was emotional. She'd been emotional since the divorce. Look, Amanda had problems, mental health issues. She was paranoid, delusional even. Delusional about what? Keith was quiet for a long moment. She thought I was involved in making people disappear. She actually believed I was part of some human trafficking operation. It was completely insane. And where did she get this idea? I don't know. The internet. She was always reading about missing persons cases, looking for patterns that weren't there. She needed help, but she refused to get it. Sarah and I exchanged glances through the mirror. The writing on Amanda's walls had included detailed information about missing persons. Was it possible Amanda had stumbled onto something real? Mr. Henderson, where were you between Friday evening and today? Home. Alone. I live alone now, remember? Look, am I under arrest? Because if not, I'd like to leave. We didn't have enough to hold him. Not yet. But as Keith left the station, I noticed him make a phone call immediately. His body language was agitated, pacing back and forth in the parking lot. I couldn't hear the conversation, but he kept looking back at the station, gesturing angrily. I decided to follow up on Dorothy's tip about the Franklin property. Sarah thought I was wasting my time, but something about the old woman's certainty nagged at me. "She's probably senile, Blake," Sarah said, "or part of whatever delusion Amanda was having." Maybe, but what if she's not? What if Amanda found something real? Sarah sighed. "Fine, but take backup, and if it's nothing, you're buying lunch for a week." The Franklin property was about 5 miles from Amanda's house, deeper into the rural area. The rain had stopped, but the clouds remained heavy and dark as I drove there with Officer Tony Mills as backup. County records showed the property had been abandoned for years, owned by some LLC based in Portland. The driveway was overgrown, barely visible beneath years of blackberry vines and tall grass. The house itself was a deteriorating 2-story farmhouse, its windows broken, roof partially collapsed. "Looks like nobody's been here in years," Tony said. But then I noticed the barn. Unlike the house, it looked maintained, too maintained for an abandoned property. "Look at the barn doors," I pointed out. "New padlock. Industrial grade." We approached carefully, hands on our weapons. The windows had been boarded up from the inside. Someone had gone to great lengths to keep people out, or to keep something in. I circled the structure, looking for another entrance. Around back, I found a ventilation grate near the ground. Crouching down, I shined my flashlight through it. What I saw made my blood run cold. "Tony, call for backup. Now." "What is it?" "Just call it in. We need a warrant and a full team here immediately." Through the grate, I could see the barn had been converted into some kind of living space. There were mattresses on the floor, chains attached to the walls, and what looked like dried blood stains on the concrete. It appeared empty now, but recently used based on fresh food wrappers I could see. Within an hour, the property was swarming with law enforcement. The barn doors were cut open, and what we found inside confirmed my worst fears. It was a holding facility. 6 separate cells had been constructed inside the barn, each with chains, buckets, and mattresses. The smell was overwhelming. Human waste, fear, and something else. Desperation. Crime scene techs began processing immediately. In what appeared to be an office area, we found notebooks, receipts, and photographs. The photographs were the worst part. Young women, dozens of them, in various states of distress. Some I recognized from missing persons files. "Jesus Christ," Sarah whispered beside me. Amanda was right. She was actually right. One of the techs called us over. "You need to see this." He'd found a notebook with detailed records, dates, code names, and transactions. Someone had been keeping meticulous records of acquisitions and transfers. Some of the dates matched exactly with the timeline Dorothy had written on Amanda's walls. My phone rang. It was the hospital. Amanda was awake and asking for the officer who found her. She said she had information she would only share with me. I drove to Portland General with a heavy sense of dread. Whatever Amanda knew, it had nearly gotten her killed. Or had Dorothy really been protecting her? Nothing made sense yet. Amanda was propped up in her hospital bed, looking pale but alert when I arrived. Her eyes were wide with fear. "Trooper Morrison?" she asked. "That's me." "How are you feeling, Amanda?" "Like I've been drugged for days, which I guess I have." She tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Dorothy, is she okay? They didn't hurt her, did they?" The question surprised me. "She's in custody." "Amanda, she held you captive, drugged you." "She saved my life," Amanda interrupted. "You don't understand. I found out about them, about what my family, what Keith." She started crying. I pulled a chair close to her bed. "Take your time. Tell me everything." Amanda's story came out in fragments, between sobs and moments of visible terror. After her divorce, she'd started noticing things about Keith that hadn't made sense during their marriage. Weekend trips he claimed were hunting expeditions, but he never brought back game. Money that appeared and disappeared without explanation. Phone calls he'd taken private, speaking in code. "I found his old phone in a box when I was packing his things," she said. "There were photos on it. Young women I didn't recognize, taken in what looked like that barn you must have found. They looked terrified." She'd started investigating, using her skills as a data analyst to piece together patterns. She found connections between Keith and several missing persons cases, financial transactions that didn't make sense, properties owned by shell companies. "I was stupid," she continued. "I confronted him. I should have gone straight to the police, but I wanted to be wrong. I wanted there to be an explanation. Keith had laughed it off at first, said the photos were from a bachelor party years ago, just guys being stupid. But Amanda kept digging. She created the timeline that Dorothy would later copy onto her walls, tracking disappearances and correlating them with Keith's trips. "That's when I noticed I was being followed," she said. "Cars parked outside my house at night. My phone acting strange, like someone was listening. Items in my house moved when I came home from work. She'd reached out to Patricia, her sister, for help. But Patricia's reaction had been strange, too calm, too dismissive. She said I was having a breakdown, that I needed professional help. But the way she said it, the words she used, it was like she'd rehearsed it. That's when I realized the horrible truth." "Your family was involved?" I said quietly. Amanda nodded, fresh tears streaming down her face. "Patricia's husband, Robert. He'd been helping Keith for years, and Michael. God, my own brother. He was the recruiter. He'd find vulnerable women, homeless, addicts, people who wouldn't be missed immediately. Chat them up, promise them jobs or places to stay." The pieces were falling into place, but one thing still didn't make sense. How does Dorothy fit into this? Amanda's expression softened slightly. Dorothy's granddaughter went missing 8 years ago. She was one of their first victims. Dorothy's been investigating on her own ever since, watching my family, gathering evidence. She knew about everything before I did. "So she kidnapped you?" "She saved me." I was getting too close to the truth. Keith called me Thursday night, said we needed to talk, that he was willing to explain everything if I'd just meet him somewhere private. I knew what that meant. I was going to disappear just like those other women. "Why didn't you call the police?" "With what evidence?" Photos that Keith would claim were fake, financial records that proved nothing concrete, and I didn't know how deep this went, who else might be involved. Dorothy showed up at my door Friday morning. She said she'd been watching, that she knew they were going to move on me. She offered me a choice. Let her protect me in her own way, or disappear forever. "So you let her drug you?" "She's a retired nurse. She said if I disappeared normally, they'd handle it internally, make sure no one ever found me. But if it looked like something bizarre had happened, if there was evidence everywhere, police would have to get involved." She was right. I thought about the scene at Amanda's house. The plastic sheets, the IV drip, the walls covered in writing. It had been theater designed to force a massive police response. Amanda, we found the barn. We know about the holding facility, but we need more. Who else is involved? Where are the other sites? She gripped my hand suddenly, her fear palpable. It's not just my family. They're small players in something much bigger. There's a network, Oregon, Washington, California. They take the women and ship them overseas, human trafficking on a massive scale. Who runs it? Who's in charge? I don't know names at that level. Keith would never tell me that much. But there are others involved. Business owners, people with money and connections. The barn is just one site. There are at least 3 others that I know of. She provided addresses, names of people she'd seen with Keith, partial license plates she'd memorized. Every detail went into my notebook. Amanda, we're going to need a formal statement. Everything you know. I'll tell you everything, but you have to promise me something. Dorothy, she's not a criminal, she's a hero. She lost her granddaughter and spent 8 years trying to save others. Promise me she won't be punished for saving my life. I couldn't make that promise, but I understood her point. Dorothy had orchestrated something incredible, turning herself into a criminal to expose real criminals. Before I left, Amanda grabbed my arm. They're not all caught yet. My family will run, they probably already have, and the people above them, they'll clean up loose ends. Anyone who can testify will be in danger, including you, especially me. I arranged for security on Amanda's hospital room, then headed back to the station. Sure enough, when units arrived at the homes of Keith Henderson, Patricia and Robert Williams, and Michael Reeves, they were all gone. Neighbors reported seeing them leave hurriedly that afternoon, around the time we'd discovered the barn. The FBI was called in given the interstate nature of the potential trafficking ring. Every law enforcement agency in the Pacific Northwest was put on alert. But Keith and the others had vanished. That evening, I sat in the interrogation room with Dorothy Milhouse. She'd waived her right to an attorney, saying she had nothing to hide. You knew what you were doing would get you arrested, I said. Of course. But it also saved Amanda and exposed them. Worth it. Tell me about your granddaughter. Dorothy's composure finally cracked slightly. Sarah, beautiful girl, just 19. She met a charming young man at a coffee shop. He promised her a modeling job in Seattle. She never made it to Seattle. How did you connect her disappearance to the Reeves family? I didn't at first. But I started watching, learning. I noticed patterns. Young women going missing, similar circumstances. I started following Michael Reeves after I saw him talking to a girl who disappeared 2 days later. That led me to Keith and eventually to the whole operation. Why didn't you go to the police? I did. 3 years ago. They said there wasn't enough evidence. So I kept watching, kept gathering information. When I realized Amanda was figuring it out too, and that they were going to kill her for it, I had to act. You risked everything. My granddaughter is dead, has been for years. But if I could save even one other girl from her fate, it would be worth any risk. The prosecutor reviewed Dorothy's case the next day. Given the circumstances and the evidence she'd helped uncover, charges were reduced to misdemeanors. No jury would convict a grandmother who'd exposed a trafficking ring while saving a life. The manhunt intensified over the next 48 hours. The FBI had taken over the case given its interstate nature, but I couldn't let it go. These people had operated in my jurisdiction for years, and I'd missed it. We'd all missed it. I spent hours reviewing the materials from the barn, trying to understand the scope of the operation. The notebooks contained coded references to at least 40 women over 8 years. Some had been reported missing. Others were transients or sex workers whose disappearances went unnoticed. Then, on Thursday morning, we got a break. A gas station owner in Bend called in a suspicious vehicle. Keith's truck, paying with cash. The driver wearing a baseball cap and keeping his head down. By the time units arrived, he was gone, but we had direction of travel. The FBI set up roadblocks on all major routes out of Bend. It was Patricia they caught first, trying to cross into California in a car she'd bought with cash that morning. She was alone, terrified, and immediately asked for a lawyer. Her husband, Robert, was picked up 2 hours later at a motel in Eugene. He'd been less careful using a credit card. When they breached his room, he was destroying documents, burning papers in the bathroom sink. But Keith and Michael remained at large. I was at the station when the call came in that would change everything. It was from a payphone in Portland, the voice disguised, but clearly under stress. "Trooper Morrison? I know you're looking for Keith Henderson and Michael Reeves. Who is this? That doesn't matter. What matters is that they're planning to leave the country tonight. Port of Portland, Warehouse 47, midnight. They're meeting their contact to get new identities and passage on a cargo ship. How do you know this? Because I was supposed to be going with them. But I'm out. I can't do this anymore. Too many girls have disappeared. Just be there, and be careful. They're armed, and they're desperate." The line went dead. I immediately contacted the FBI task force. The tip could be a trap, but we couldn't ignore it. The Port of Portland was federal jurisdiction, which meant the FBI took point, but they allowed me to be part of the operation. I think they recognized that this case had become personal for me. Perhaps too personal, but I needed to see it through. We set up surveillance on Warehouse 47 by 10 p.m. The building was part of the older section of the port, mostly abandoned except for occasional storage use. Perfect for a clandestine meeting. At 11:47 p.m., a sedan arrived. Keith and Michael got out, both carrying duffel bags. They looked nervous, constantly checking their surroundings. They entered the warehouse through a side door. 5 minutes later, another vehicle arrived. 2 men I didn't recognize, both in expensive suits despite the late hour and industrial setting. They followed Keith and Michael inside. The FBI team leader made the call to move in. We had probable cause, and waiting risked losing them if there was another exit we didn't know about. I was part of the second wave, entering after the initial breach team. The warehouse was dimly lit, filled with old shipping containers and abandoned equipment. We could hear voices echoing from deeper inside. The takedown happened fast. FBI agents surrounded the 4 men, who were standing around a table covered with documents and cash. Keith saw me and his face contorted with rage. "You," he snarled. "This is your fault. You should have left it alone." Michael tried to run, but didn't make it 3 steps before being tackled. The 2 suits, later identified as document forgers with connections to international smuggling operations, surrendered without resistance. As Keith was being cuffed, he looked at me with pure hatred. "You have no idea what you've done. No idea who you've pissed off. This is bigger than you can imagine." "Then, help us understand," I said. "Cooperate. Tell us about the network." He laughed bitterly. "And end up dead? No thanks. I'll take my chances in prison." The arrests made headlines, but I knew Keith was right about one thing. This was bigger than just these 4 individuals. The documents seized at the warehouse revealed connections to trafficking operations in 6 states and 3 countries. The Reeves family operation had been a small part of a massive criminal enterprise. Over the next weeks, the investigation expanded. Patricia's lawyer negotiated a deal. She would testify in exchange for a reduced sentence. Her information led to 12 more arrests across the Pacific Northwest. Robert Williams broke after 3 days in federal custody. He provided detailed information about the operation's structure, the routes used to move victims, and the offshore accounts used to launder money. His cooperation led to the discovery of 2 more holding facilities, though both had been abandoned and cleaned before we got there. Michael Reeves refused to cooperate at all. He maintained his innocence despite overwhelming evidence, claiming he was being framed by his vindictive sister. Keith Henderson was the interesting one. He didn't deny his involvement, but he also wouldn't provide any information about the larger network. He seemed genuinely frightened of someone or something. 3 weeks after the arrests, I was called to the Federal Detention Center. Keith had asked to speak with me specifically. I found him in an interview room, looking haggard. He'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "Trooper Morrison," he said, "I need to make a deal." "That's not up to me." "Talk to the federal prosecutor." "No, you don't understand. I need protection, real protection. Witness protection program level." "From whom?" He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "There are people involved in this that you haven't even imagined. People with real power. They're going to clean house, eliminate anyone who can testify against them. Give us names." "Not until I have a signed deal guaranteeing my safety. But I'll give you this for free. Watch your back." "And Amanda's. We were supposed to grab her and deliver her to them as proof we could handle problems. When that failed, when Dorothy interfered, let's just say they're not happy." "Are you threatening her?" "I'm warning you. I'm locked up, my operation is done, but theirs isn't. Amanda knows too much, and now so do you." I left the detention center deeply unsettled. That night, I called Amanda to check on her. She'd been released from the hospital and was staying with a friend in Washington. Location undisclosed for her safety. "Blake?" she answered, recognizing my number. "Is everything okay?" "I spoke with Keith today. He implied you might still be in danger." There was a long pause. "I know, I've been getting calls. No one speaks, but I know it's them. And yesterday, someone left a rose on my friend's doorstep, a black rose. You need to contact the FBI immediately. I have. They say without a direct threat, there's nothing they can do. But Blake, I'm scared. I made a decision that probably violated several protocols. Pack your things. I'm coming to get you." I drove to Washington that night, met Amanda at her friend's house, and brought her back to Oregon, to a safe house that only a few trusted officers knew about. It was off the books, but I couldn't shake Keith's warning. Dorothy, meanwhile, had become something of a folk hero. The media had picked up her story. The grandmother who'd spent 8 years hunting the traffickers who'd taken her granddaughter. She refused all interview requests, saying she'd only wanted justice, not fame. I visited her at her home one evening, needing to understand something. "Dorothy, you knew this would destroy Amanda's family. Why didn't you warn her earlier?" She was sitting in her living room, surrounded by photos of her granddaughter. Would she have believed me? Her own sister, her brother, her ex-husband, all involved in trafficking? She had to discover it herself. All I could do was make sure she survived the discovery. You risked her life. I saved her life. They were going to kill her, Blake. I heard them planning it. Michael was supposed to do it, make it look like suicide, depression from the divorce. No one would have questioned it. The revelation hit me hard. We'd been even closer to tragedy than I'd realized. Dorothy, do you know who's really behind all this? The people Keith is so afraid of? She looked at me for a long moment. I have suspicions. People with money, power, connections, but no proof. That's always been the problem. They're too well insulated. The Keith Hendersons of the world take the fall, but the real monsters stay hidden. Over the next month, the federal case progressed. More arrests were made based on information from Patricia and Robert. 11 missing women were found alive in various locations, traumatized but surviving. 15 others were confirmed dead, their bodies recovered from remote locations. But then, things started to go wrong. First, one of the document forgers arrested at the warehouse was found dead in his cell. Official cause was suicide, but the circumstances were suspicious. Then, Robert Williams was attacked in federal custody. He survived, but refused to testify after that, too terrified to continue cooperating. Patricia's lawyer reported that she'd received death threats. Her children had been approached by strangers offering them candy. The message was clear: cooperate and your family pays. Even I wasn't immune. My wife started noticing cars following her. Our home phone rang at all hours with no one on the line. One night, we found our dog dead in the backyard. No obvious cause. The FBI provided some protection, but their resources were limited. The investigation was massive, spanning multiple states, and they couldn't guard everyone forever. Then, exactly 2 months after the initial arrests, everything changed. I was at home when the call came. It was the federal prosecutor. "Blake, Keith Henderson is dead." "What? How?" "Killed in prison." "It's being investigated, but initial reports suggest another inmate did it. A lifer with no known connection to the case." "That's not possible. He was in protective custody. Someone got to him anyway." "And Blake, there's more. Michael Reeves was found dead in his cell an hour ago. Same situation, different prison, different killer, but same result." The implications were clear. Someone was cleaning house, eliminating witnesses. The network was protecting itself. "What about Patricia and Robert?" "They're being moved to federal witness protection immediately. But Blake, I need to ask, where's Amanda?" I hesitated. "She's safe." "Blake, if you know where she is, she needs to be in official protection. These people, whoever they are, they're not playing games." That night, I moved Amanda again. This time to a cabin owned by a retired cop friend who owed me a favor. It was completely off the grid, no paper trail connecting it to me or anyone in law enforcement. Amanda was terrified but trying to stay strong. "They're all dead, aren't they? Keith? Michael?" "Yes." "Then it's over. The case will die with them. The FBI won't give up." She laughed bitterly. "The FBI doesn't even know who they're really looking for." Keith was right. This goes higher than anyone imagines. "Then help us. Tell us what else you know." "I've told you everything." "But Blake, there's something you need to understand. The trafficking, as horrible as it is, it's just one part. These people are into everything. Drugs, weapons, murder for hire, and they own people. Judges, politicians, cops." "Cops? How do you think they operated for so long without being caught?" "They had inside information, always one step ahead." The accusation hung heavy in the air. A corrupt cop or cops had been helping them. I thought about all the times investigations had gone nowhere. Witnesses had disappeared. Evidence had vanished. It made horrible sense. "Amanda, do you have any proof? Any names?" "No. Keith never told me that much. But he did say once that their inside man was the reason they'd lasted so long. Someone who could make problems go away." I left the cabin that night with more questions than answers. If there was a corrupt cop involved, who could I trust? Who could any of us trust? The investigation continued for months, but without Keith and Michael's testimony. and with Patricia and Robert too terrified to fully cooperate, progress stalled. The FBI managed to dismantle parts of the network, but the top levels remained untouchable. Amanda stayed hidden, moving between safe houses every few weeks. I was one of only 3 people who knew her locations, and even I started to feel paranoid, checking for surveillance, varying my routes, trusting no one completely. Then, 6 months after the initial arrests, Dorothy Milhouse contacted me. She said she had information that couldn't wait. I met her at a small diner outside Portland, a place neither of us had been before. She looked older, frailer, the stress of everything finally showing. "I've been doing more digging," she said without preamble. "Following money trails, looking into shell companies. I found something." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were corporate documents, financial records, and photographs. "David Brennan," she said, pointing to one of the photos. "He owns 12 businesses in Oregon, sits on 3 hospital boards, donates millions to political campaigns. He's also the money behind the trafficking network." I studied the documents. The connections were complex, but traceable if you knew what to look for. "How did you get this?" "I have my ways." "But Blake, there's more. Look at this photo from a charity gala 5 years ago." I looked. It showed Brennan with several other wealthy individuals, but in the background, partially obscured but recognizable, was someone I knew. Someone from law enforcement. "That's Detective Ray Collins, Portland PD, now retired. He was at several events with Brennan over the years. And look at this." She showed me banking records, regular deposits into an account connected to Collins, always just under the reporting threshold, dating back 8 years. "This is the inside man," I breathed. "I believe so. But proving it is another matter. These records were obtained questionably. They won't hold up in court. But they're enough to start an official investigation." Dorothy shook her head. "Blake, you're not understanding. Brennan owns judges, prosecutors. Any official investigation will be sabotaged from the start. The only way to get him is to catch him in the act. That's impossible. He's too well insulated." "Maybe not." Dorothy pulled out another document. "The network took a big hit with the arrests. They need to rebuild their supply chain. My sources say they're planning a major acquisition. 12 to 15 women all at once to make up for lost inventory. When? 2 weeks, during the Rose Festival. Lots of tourists, lots of young women who won't be immediately missed. It's the perfect hunting ground. We need to tell the FBI. And watch them bungle it? Or worse, have Collins or someone else tip off Brennan?" Dorothy fixed me with an intense stare. "Blake, this might be our only chance to expose them all." I knew what she was suggesting was dangerous, possibly illegal. Operating outside official channels, conducting our own investigation. But she was right. If there were more corrupt cops, going through proper channels would only alert the network. "What do you propose?" "We watch. We document. We get irrefutable evidence. Then we go public, to the media and the FBI simultaneously. Make it impossible to cover up." I thought about Amanda, still in hiding. About the 40 women who'd been trafficked over the years. About Dorothy's granddaughter who never came home. "All right, but we do this carefully, no heroics." Dorothy smiled grimly. "I'm 73 years old, Blake. Heroics are beyond me. But justice isn't." Over the next 2 weeks we prepared. I recruited 2 officers I trusted absolutely. Men who'd been with me for years, and had no connection to the Portland PD or Detective Collins. We set up surveillance on locations the network had used before, monitoring for suspicious activity. Amanda wanted to help, but I refused to let her leave the safe house. She was still the only living witness who could testify to Keith's direct involvement, and I couldn't risk her safety. The Rose Festival began, and Portland filled with tourists. We watched, waited, documented, and then, on the third night, we saw them. Michael had been the recruiter before, but with him dead, they'd brought in someone new. A woman this time, attractive, well-dressed, approaching young women at bars and clubs. She was good, choosing targets carefully. Women who were alone, perhaps a little drunk, definitely vulnerable. We followed her to a parking garage where she met with two men. They had a van, nondescript, the kind that wouldn't draw attention. Over the course of the night, they collected 4 women, all seemingly willing to go with them, probably promised after-parties or exclusive events. I wanted to intervene immediately, but Dorothy was right. We needed to follow this to the source. So we tracked the van, staying far enough back to avoid detection. It led us to a warehouse in an industrial district, not far from where Keith and Michael had been arrested months earlier. We set up surveillance and waited. Over the next 3 nights, more vans arrived. By my count, they'd brought in at least 12 women. But the warehouse was heavily guarded, and we couldn't get close enough to see what was happening inside. Then, on the 4th night, Brennan himself arrived. I photographed him entering the warehouse, staying for 2 hours, then leaving in his luxury sedan. This was the connection we needed, direct evidence linking him to the operation. But we still needed to know what was happening to the women. Were they being held there? Were they being moved somewhere else? The answer came the next night. A cargo truck arrived at the warehouse. Through binoculars, I watched as women were loaded into hidden compartments in the truck. They appeared drugged, barely conscious. This was it, the moment we'd been waiting for. I called 911 from a burner phone, reporting suspicious activity and possible human trafficking. Then I called a journalist I knew, telling her to get to the warehouse immediately with a camera crew. Finally, I called the FBI directly, bypassing local channels. The response was massive. Within minutes, police units were converging on the warehouse. The FBI arrived shortly after. The media got there just in time to film the women being rescued from the truck. 14 women were found, all alive though heavily sedated. The warehouse contained evidence of the broader operation: documents, computers, phones. Several men were arrested on site, though Brennan wasn't among them. But we had the photographs, the documentation of his presence. Combined with the evidence from the warehouse, it was enough for a warrant. Brennan was arrested at his home the next morning. Detective Collins was picked up an hour later. The network, finally, was truly unraveling. The trials took 2 years. Brennan hired the best lawyers money could buy, but the evidence was overwhelming. He was convicted on 43 counts, including human trafficking, kidnapping, and conspiracy to commit murder. He received life without parole. Collins pled guilty to avoid trial, admitting he'd been feeding information to the network for 9 years. He provided details about other corrupt officials, leading to 6 more arrests. The recruiter we'd followed was actually an undercover FBI agent who'd infiltrated the network months earlier. Her testimony was crucial in securing convictions. In total, 37 people were convicted in connection with the trafficking ring. Over 200 women were identified as victims, though the real number was probably higher. Amanda finally came out of hiding to testify. Her testimony, combined with the evidence she'd gathered, was instrumental in securing convictions. She now works as an advocate for trafficking survivors. Dorothy lived to see justice for her granddaughter, though Sarah's body was never found. Dorothy passed away peacefully 6 months after the trials ended, finally at peace. As for me, I couldn't go back to regular patrol after everything that happened. I now work with a federal task force focused on human trafficking. The work is hard, often heartbreaking, but necessary. Sometimes I think about that afternoon in the rain, walking into Amanda's house, finding Dorothy sitting calmly beside that hospital bed. If she hadn't acted, if she hadn't forced our involvement, the network might still be operating. Keith had been right about one thing. It was bigger than we'd imagined. But he'd been wrong about something else. It wasn't too big to stop. It just took the right combination of courage, determination, and a grandmother's love for her lost granddaughter. The complete truth never made it to the public. The full extent of the corruption, the number of victims, the involvement of prominent citizens, some details were kept classified to protect ongoing investigations and victim identities. But the important truth got out. Predators were stopped, women were saved, and justice, however imperfect, was served. I still get calls sometimes, tips about suspicious activity, pleas for help from families with missing loved ones. I investigate every one, because I learned something from Dorothy Milhouse. Sometimes the system fails, but that doesn't mean we stop fighting. We just find another way. I keep a photo on my desk now, one Dorothy gave me before she died. It's of her granddaughter Sarah, smiling at the camera, full of life and possibility. A reminder of why we do this work, and of the cost when we fail. The Reeves trafficking case officially closed 3 years after that rainy afternoon in Oregon. But for those of us who lived through it, who saw the darkness that can hide in ordinary places, it never really ends. We remain vigilant, watching for signs, ready to act. Because somewhere out there, another Dorothy is searching for answers. Another Amanda is uncovering terrible truths. And another network is operating in the shadows, believing they're untouchable, they're wrong. We proved that in Oregon, and we'll prove it again, as many times as necessary. That's the thing about evil. It thinks it can hide forever. But sometimes all it takes is one person refusing to give up, one unexpected discovery, one moment of courage to bring it all crashing down. The rain has stopped now in Oregon, at least for today. But I know it'll return, as it always does. And when it does, I'll be ready, watching the back roads and hidden places where predators think they're safe. The heat was unbearable that July afternoon in 2021. Nebraska summers are brutal, the kind of heat that makes the asphalt shimmer like water and turns even the calmest person into a powder keg waiting for a spark. I'd been patrolling Interstate 80 between Lincoln and Grand Island for 7 years, and I'd learned that summer brought out the worst in drivers. Something about being trapped in a metal box on burning asphalt while the temperature pushed past 105 degrees made people lose their minds. My name is Shane Cooper, Badge 4827, Nebraska State Patrol. That Tuesday started like any other summer shift. Responding to overheated vehicles, a couple of speeding tickets, the usual. I was parked at mile marker 342, watching for speeders and enjoying my air conditioning when the call came through that would change everything. Unit 23, we have reports of aggressive driving, possible road rage incident in progress. Eastbound I-80 near mile marker 338. I picked up my radio. Unit 23 responding. Vehicle description: Black Ford F-150, newer model, Nebraska plates. Driver reportedly brake-checking other vehicles and attempting to run cars off the road. We've had 3 calls in the last 5 minutes. I was 4 miles from the location. 10-4, dispatch, en route. Send backup to my 20. Copy that, Unit 23. Unit 15 is approximately 10 minutes out. 10 minutes. A lot could happen in 10 minutes when someone was in full road rage mode. I'd seen it before, normally rational people becoming homicidal maniacs over a perceived slight on the highway. Someone doesn't signal, someone merges too close, someone goes too slow in the passing lane, and suddenly you've got attempted murder at 70 miles per hour. I hit my lights and sirens, pushing my cruiser up to 90. The interstate was relatively clear for a Tuesday afternoon, mostly truckers and a few families probably heading to Colorado to escape the Nebraska heat. As I approached mile marker 338, I could see the situation ahead. The black F-150 was right on the bumper of a silver Honda Accord, swerving left and right, trying to intimidate the driver. The Honda was desperately trying to get away, but every time it changed lanes, the truck followed. Other vehicles were pulling onto the shoulder to avoid the confrontation. Through the Honda's rear window, I could see the driver, a young woman, probably mid-20s, absolutely terrified. She was white-knuckling the steering wheel, constantly checking her mirrors. The truck would back off a few feet, then accelerate aggressively, closing to within inches of her bumper. Classic intimidation tactics. Dispatch, I have visual on the incident. Black Ford F-150, Nebraska plates, Victor 247 Alpha November. Vehicle is actively pursuing and endangering a silver Honda Accord. Requesting immediate backup. Copy Unit 23. Unit 15 is now 7 minutes out. Unit 12 is coming from the west. ETA 12 minutes. I needed to intervene now. The truck driver was escalating, getting more aggressive with each passing second. I pulled alongside the F-150, sirens blaring, and got my first good look at the driver. White male, probably mid-40s, heavy-set, with a face twisted in absolute rage. His mouth was moving, screaming something I couldn't hear over the sirens. When he saw me, instead of backing off like most people would, he jerked his wheel toward my cruiser, forcing me to brake hard to avoid a collision. The Honda driver saw her chance and accelerated, taking the next exit, Highway 34 toward Pleasant Dale. Smart move, getting off the interstate. But the F-150 wasn't done. The driver cut across 2 lanes of traffic, nearly causing a semi to jackknife, and followed the Honda off the exit. Suspect is exiting at Highway 34 in pursuit of victim vehicle, I called out, following them down the ramp. Highway 34 was worse than the interstate for this kind of situation. 2 lanes, no median, less room to maneuver. The Honda was about a quarter mile ahead now, but the truck was gaining. I saw the driver reach over to his passenger seat, grabbing something. Dispatch, suspect appears to be reaching for an object, possible weapon. That changed everything. This was no longer just road rage. It was potentially attempted assault with a deadly weapon. I accelerated past the truck, getting between him and the Honda. The woman turned into a Casey's General Store parking lot, and I motioned for her to keep driving, to get somewhere safe. She understood and continued through the parking lot and back onto the road, heading toward town. The truck tried to go around me, but I blocked him. He slammed on his brakes, tires smoking, and came to a stop right in the middle of Highway 34. Cars behind us were stopping, creating a traffic backup. I positioned my cruiser at an angle behind his truck, giving myself cover, and got out with my hand on my weapon. "Driver, turn off the engine and show me your hands." The truck door flew open and outstepped Vincent Mallory, though I didn't know his name yet. He was bigger than he'd looked in the truck, probably 6 feet 3 inches, 280 pounds, wearing jeans and a sweat-soaked t-shirt. His face was red, veins bulging in his neck, fists clenched. "That bitch tried to kill me," he screamed. "She cut me off." nearly sent me into the ditch. "Sir, I need you to calm down and return to your vehicle." "Calm down? Calm down? She's the one who should be arrested. Where is she? Where'd that bitch go?" He took a step toward me. Even from 10 feet away, I could smell the alcohol on him. Day drinking in this heat was asking for trouble. "Sir, stop right there. Have you been drinking?" "What I've been doing is none of your goddamn business. I'm the victim here. Sir, I need you to stop moving. Turn around and place your hands on your vehicle." "Or what?" "You'll shoot me." "For what? Being upset, that bitch." "Turn around and place your hands on the vehicle. Now." For a moment I thought he might comply. He started to turn, then suddenly charged at me. 280 pounds of drunken rage coming at full speed. I'd been through defensive tactics training, but nothing really prepares you for that much mass and fury. I sidestepped at the last second, and Vincent crashed into my cruiser, denting the quarter panel. I grabbed his arm, trying to get control, but he spun and caught me with an elbow to the ribs. The air went out of my lungs, and I staggered back. He came at me again, swinging wildly. I ducked under a haymaker and managed to get my pepper spray out, giving him a full dose in the face. He screamed, hands going to his eyes, and I was able to get him on the ground and cuffed. Unit 23, one in custody. Need medical for pepper spray exposure. As Vincent writhed on the ground, cursing and threatening to sue me, my department and everyone else he could think of, I searched his truck. What I found made my blood run cold. On the passenger seat was a loaded Glock 19. In the center console, a folding knife and brass knuckles. But the most disturbing thing was a notebook. Page after page of license plate numbers with descriptions of vehicles and drivers. Some had addresses next to them. The Honda's plate was there, circled in red, with the notation, Tuesday, 2:15 p.m., I-80 East. This wasn't random road rage. Vincent had been hunting. Backup arrived, along with paramedics to treat Vincent's eyes. As they cleaned the pepper spray and checked him over, he kept ranting about injustice, about how I'd pay for this, about how he knew people who would make my life hell. "I know who you are, Shane Cooper," he said as they loaded him into the patrol car. "Badge 4827. I know where you work. I know your schedule. This isn't over." I'd heard threats before. Part of the job. Angry people say things they don't mean, but something about the way Vincent said it, calm and certain despite the circumstances, made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. At the station, we processed Vincent Mallory, age 44, resident of Lincoln. His record was troubling. 2 previous arrests for assault, 1 for criminal threatening, and multiple traffic violations, including a previous road rage incident from 2019 where he'd followed a woman home and threatened her in her driveway. He'd gotten probation for that one. The woman from the Honda, Rachel Torres, came in to give her statement. She was still shaking, hours after the incident. "I was just driving," she said. "Maybe I merged a little close to him. I don't know. It was busy. Everyone was merging. Then suddenly he was on my bumper, honking, flashing his lights. When I changed lanes to let him pass, he changed lanes too. That's when I knew he wasn't trying to pass. He was coming after me." "Had you ever seen him before?" "Never. I don't even remember merging in front of him. It happened so fast. But he just exploded. He was trying to ram me, Officer Cooper. If I hadn't gotten off the interstate when I did, she didn't need to finish. We both knew what could have happened. Vincent was charged with DUI, assault on a peace officer, terroristic threats, possession of a weapon while intoxicated, and stalking. With his record, he was looking at serious time. The prosecutor, Janet Williams, was confident. "This guy's a menace," she told me. With the notebook showing premeditation and his previous incidents, we can put him away for at least 5 years, maybe more. But Vincent's family had money. His brother owned several construction companies in Omaha. They posted his $50,000 bail like it was nothing, and Vincent was out within 48 hours. That's when things got really bad. The first sign was the phone calls. My wife Sarah started getting hang-ups at home. 3 or 4 a day, always from different numbers. Then I started noticing the same blue sedan in my neighborhood, always parked just far enough away that I couldn't get a good look at the driver. Eugene Patterson, my partner of 3 years, noticed it too. "Shane, that car's been behind us for the last 10 miles, he said one day as we patrolled. "Every turn we make, it makes. Could be coincidence. Could be. But after what happened with Vincent..." Eugene was right to be concerned. Vincent wasn't the type to let things go. His notebook showed he'd been tracking people who'd wronged him for years, and now I was at the top of his list. I talked to Captain Jessica Barnes about it. She took it seriously, especially after what we'd found in Vincent's truck. "We'll increase patrols around your house," she said, "and I want you to vary your routes to and from work. No patterns. Make it harder for him to track you." But Vincent was smart. He never did anything overtly illegal. The phone calls couldn't be traced to him. The blue sedan was registered to a company that didn't exist beyond a P.O. box. He was harassing me, but in a way that left no evidence. Then came the note. I found it on my windshield after a shift, 3 weeks after the arrest. Block letters, printed on plain paper. "You took everything from me. Now it's my turn." No signature, no fingerprints. But I knew who it was from. Sarah was scared. Our son Tommy, just 10 years old, didn't understand why Mom was suddenly driving him to school instead of him taking the bus, why Dad was checking all the locks twice before bed. "Is someone trying to hurt us?" he asked one night. "Nobody," I lied. "Dad just has to be extra careful because of work." But I wasn't sure I was lying. Vincent's rage, his methodical tracking of people, his escalation, it all pointed to someone capable of real violence. The trial was set for 3 months out. 3 months of looking over our shoulders, of jumping at strange noises, of wondering when Vincent would make his move. Eugene had my back, checking on my family when I was on shift, making sure they were safe. But we couldn't maintain that level of vigilance forever. Something had to give. It gave exactly 1 week before the trial was set to begin. Vincent disappeared exactly 1 week before his trial was scheduled to begin. He'd cut off his ankle monitor at 3 a.m. on a Monday, left it on his kitchen table, and vanished. His truck was gone. His bank accounts had been emptied over the previous weeks. Small withdrawals to avoid attention, but totaling nearly $30,000. He'd been planning this. Captain Barnes called me at home when they discovered he was gone. "Shane, Vincent Mallory has fled. We've got units at his house now, but he's been gone for at least 4 hours. I'm sending a unit to your house immediately." Sarah was standing in our bedroom doorway, having heard my side of the conversation. Her face was pale. "He's coming for us, isn't he?" she said. "We don't know that. He might just be running." But we both knew better. Vincent wasn't the running type. He was the revenge type. Within an hour, our house looked like a crime scene. Patrol cars out front, officers checking the perimeter. Tommy was confused and scared. Sarah was trying to hold it together, and I was on the phone with Eugene. "I'll come stay with you," he offered. "Extra protection." "No, we're going to a hotel. Somewhere random. Make it harder for him to find us." But even as I said it, I wondered if anywhere was safe. Vincent had shown he could track people, follow them, learn their patterns, and he'd had 3 months to learn mine. We packed quickly, just essentials. As we were loading the car, my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, came over. "Officer Cooper, is everything all right?" All these police cars. "Just a precaution, Mrs. Patterson. We'll be gone for a few days." She looked worried. "This is about that man from the news, isn't it?" The road rage one question mark word had gotten out about Vincent's arrest, his threats against me. Small town Nebraska. Everyone knew everyone's business. We checked into a Holiday Inn in Grand Island, about 30 miles from home. False names, paid in cash, car parked where it couldn't be seen from the road. I felt like a criminal hiding from the law instead of a cop protecting his family. That first night nobody slept. Every sound in the hallway made us jump. Tommy asked if we could go home. Sarah held him and told him it was an adventure, like camping. But her eyes met mine over his head, and I saw the fear there. The next morning, Eugene called with an update. "They found his truck," he said. "Abandoned at a rest stop off I-29 near the Iowa border. He could be anywhere by now." "Any sign of another vehicle?" "Nothing. But Shane, they found something in the truck. Photos. Photos? Of your house, your family. Sarah leaving for work, Tommy at school. He's been watching you for weeks, maybe longer." My blood ran cold. All those times I'd felt watched but dismissed it as paranoia, I'd been right. "There's more," Eugene continued. "Remember that notebook with the license plates? They've been going through it. He's been tracking dozens of people, some for years. Everyone who ever cut him off, honked at him, looked at him wrong. This guy's been building an enemies list for a long time. Any indication where he might go? His ex-wife is in California. His brother says he hasn't heard from him. But Shane, the FBI, is involved now. This crossed state lines when he went to Iowa. They're taking it seriously. The FBI set up a command post at the Grand Island State Patrol Office. Special Agent Diana Foster was in charge, a no-nonsense woman who'd worked fugitive cases for 15 years. "Mr. Mallory has a pattern," she told me during a briefing. "He doesn't forgive, and he doesn't forget." Every person in that notebook eventually faced some form of retaliation. Slashed tires, broken windows, dead animals left on doorsteps. You're different, though. How so? You're law enforcement. You publicly humiliated him, arrested him, cost him money and freedom. For someone like Vincent, that's unforgivable. He won't just want to scare you, he'll want to destroy you. Comforting words. We moved hotels every 2 days, never staying in the same town twice. Sarah took leave from her job as a nurse. Tommy was pulled from school. Our entire life was on hold because of one man's rage. Then, on day 5 of the manhunt, Rachel Torres called me. "Officer Cooper, I just got a call from Vincent." "When?" "What did he say?" 10 minutes ago. He said this was all my fault, that if I hadn't been such a bad driver, none of this would have happened. He said you and I ruined his life and we were going to pay. Did he say where he was? No, but there was noise in the background. Like machinery. Maybe construction equipment. Vincent's brother owned construction companies. We'd checked all the official sites, but there were probably dozens of job sites. Some remote, some after hours. Agent Foster mobilized teams to check every construction site associated with Vincent's brother. It was a long shot, but it was something. That night, as we lay in another anonymous hotel room, Sarah finally broke down. "I can't do this anymore, Shane. Living in fear, running, hiding, this isn't a life. I know, I'm sorry, this is my fault. No, it's his fault. But Shane, what if he never gets caught? What if this is our life now?" I didn't have an answer. Some fugitives were never found. Some spent years hiding, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Could we live like this for years? The answer came the next morning. Eugene called at 6 a.m. Shane, they found Vincent, or rather, he found them. What do you mean? He walked into the State Patrol office in Lincoln 20 minutes ago. Said he wanted to turn himself in, but only to you. It had to be a trap. But what choice did I have? I drove to Lincoln with a full escort, 2 FBI vehicles and 3 State Patrol units. Sarah begged me not to go, but I had to face him. This had to end. Vincent was in an interrogation room, cuffed to the table, looking haggard. He'd lost weight in the week he'd been gone, hadn't shaved, clothes dirty, but his eyes were still full of that rage. Agent Foster and Captain Barnes wanted to be in the room, but Vincent had been clear, just me, or he wouldn't talk. I sat across from him, trying to project calm I didn't feel. "Hello, Vincent." "Shane, you look tired. Haven't been sleeping well? Where have you been, Vincent?" He smiled. "Around, watching, learning. You know, you should really be more careful about your daily routines. Even when you're trying to be random, patterns emerge. You've been following us? Not following. Anticipating. I know you, Shane. I've studied you. I know how you think, how you react. I knew you'd move hotels every few days. I knew you'd pick chain hotels over local ones. I knew you'd keep your family together instead of separating them." The implication was clear. He'd known where we were the whole time. Why turn yourself in? Because I realized something. Killing you would be too easy, too quick. You'd be dead, but you wouldn't suffer. Your family would mourn and move on. That's not justice. Then what is? This. You spending the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, wondering when I'll get out, when I'll come for you. Because I will get out, Shane. Good behavior, appeals, technicalities. The system you serve is full of holes. And when I do get out, maybe it'll be 5 years, maybe 10, maybe 20, but I'll remember, and I'll find you. Is that a threat? It's a promise. You took everything from me because of a momentary loss of temper. So, I'm going to take your peace of mind forever. Every time you hear a car backfire, you'll think it's me. Every time a car follows you for more than a few blocks, you'll wonder. Every time your son doesn't answer his phone immediately, you'll panic. That's my revenge, Shane, not your death, your fear. He was right, and we both knew it. Even locked up, he'd already won. I'd never feel completely safe again. Why the road rage, Vincent? Why track all those people? For the first time, his expression softened slightly. You ever feel powerless, Shane? Like the whole world is against you, and there's nothing you can do about it? Sometimes. That's how I feel every day. My business failed, my wife left me, I can't see my kids, and every day people disrespect me. Cut me off, don't signal, go too slow. Each one is a reminder that I don't matter, that no one cares about me or my time or my feelings. So, you make them care. Exactly. For a few minutes, I matter. They see me, fear me, respect me. For those few minutes, I have power. But it's not real power, Vincent, it's just fear. Sometimes they're the same thing. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Vincent leaned forward as much as his cuffs would allow. I want you to know something, Shane. Rachel Torres? She really did cut me off, dangerously close. If I hadn't braked, we would have crashed. That doesn't justify. I know, I'm not justifying, I'm explaining. She never even knew she did it. Never looked, never signaled, just merged, like I wasn't even there, like I didn't exist. Do you know what that feels like? To be so insignificant that someone can almost kill you and not even notice. So, you tried to kill her? I wanted her to see me. To know I existed. To understand that her actions have consequences. Vincent, your actions have consequences too. You're going to prison. I know. But Shane, so are you. A prison of fear, of constantly looking over your shoulder. The only difference is, I'll eventually get out of mine. The trial proceeded without Vincent fleeing again. He pled guilty to some charges, fought others. The notebook became key evidence, showing years of stalking and harassment. Rachel testified about her terror that day. I testified about the arrest, the threats, the pursuit. Vincent was sentenced to 15 years with possibility of parole in 7. As they led him away, he looked at me and mouthed, 7 years. Sarah wanted us to move, to leave Nebraska entirely. Start fresh somewhere Vincent wouldn't know to look. But I refused. This was our home, our life. I wouldn't let him take that too. Eugene understood. You can't let them win, Shane. The moment you change your life because of them, they own you. But I did change. I became hypervigilant, always checking mirrors, always aware of vehicles around me. I varied my routes obsessively. I installed security cameras at home, got a concealed carry permit for off-duty. Tommy noticed the changes. Dad, why are you always looking around? Why do we have all these cameras? Just being safe, buddy. Because of the bad man? Sarah and I exchanged glances. We'd tried to shield him from the details, but kids know more than you think. Yes, because of the bad man, but he's in jail now. But you're still scared. He was right. I was still scared. Vincent had won. 2 years passed. Vincent served his time in the Nebraska State Penitentiary, and by all accounts, he was a model prisoner. No fights, no infractions, attended anger management classes, even got his GED. The prison psychologist wrote glowing reports about his progress. But I knew better. Vincent was playing the long game. Every few months I'd get a letter from him. They were always benign on the surface, discussing his rehabilitation, apologizing for his past behavior, talking about the books he was reading. But there was always an undertone, always something that let me know he hadn't forgotten. Dear Officer Cooper, one letter read, I've been studying Buddhism, learning about patience and the long view of life. It's fascinating how time changes everything, how what seems permanent is actually temporary. 7 years isn't really that long when you think about it. It's amazing how fast time passes. Before you know it, years have gone by. I hope you and your family are well. Respectfully, Vincent. Sarah wanted me to report the letters, get a restraining order, something. But what could I report? A prisoner talking about Buddhism and the passage of time? There was nothing overtly threatening, nothing actionable. Vincent was too smart for that. Eugene thought I was being paranoid. Shane, maybe he really is reforming. It happens. Prison changes some people. Not Vincent, he's not reformed, he's refined. He's learning to hide it better. Life went on. Tommy entered middle school, started playing basketball. Sarah got promoted to head nurse in her department. I made sergeant, got off the road and into more administrative duties. We bought a new house, a bigger one with a better security system. Some days, I almost forgot about Vincent Mallory. Then, in year 3 of his sentence, something happened that brought it all back. Marcus Mallory, Vincent's son from his first marriage, enrolled at the University of Nebraska. He was 19, studying criminal justice of all things. And he reached out to me. Officer Cooper, his email read, I know this is strange, but I'd like to meet with you. I want to understand what happened with my father. I want to understand why he became what he became. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him. We sat in a coffee shop in Lincoln, and I saw Vincent in the young man's face, same jaw, same eyes, but without the rage. I haven't seen my father in 5 years, Marcus said. not since before the incident with you. My mom won't let me visit him in prison. Your mother's a smart woman. Is he really as dangerous as everyone says? I thought about how to answer. Your father has a lot of anger, Marcus. He doesn't know how to let things go. He wasn't always like that. When I was little, he was different. Happier. Then the divorce, the business failing, it all just broke something in him. What do you want from me, Marcus? I want to understand, and I want to apologize for what he did to you and your family. You don't need to apologize for your father's actions. Maybe not, but someone should. We talked for an hour. Marcus was nothing like his father, thoughtful, calm, genuinely trying to understand. As we were leaving, he said something that chilled me. Officer Cooper, my dad's been talking to other inmates. Guys with similar stories, similar anger. They call themselves the Highway Brotherhood. They share stories about cops who wronged them, about getting revenge when they get out. I thought you should know. A prison gang of road ragers. Perfect. I reported this to Agent Foster, who was still monitoring Vincent's case. She looked into it and confirmed that Vincent had indeed been associating with other inmates convicted of road rage-related crimes. There's about 6 of them, she told me, all with similar profiles. Middle-aged men, history of anger issues, feeling of being disrespected by society. Vincent's become something of a leader to them. Can we do anything about it? Unless they actually plan or commit crimes, no. Talking about revenge isn't illegal. Sharing stories isn't illegal. We're watching them, but that's all we can do. Year 4 brought a development nobody expected. Vincent's brother, the successful one with the construction companies, was arrested for tax evasion and fraud. His businesses collapsed, assets frozen. Vincent's commissary money dried up, his lawyer could no longer be paid. I heard about it from Marcus, who'd kept in touch despite my discouragement. Dad's lost it, Marcus told me over the phone. The prison called my mom. He's been in solitary for the past week after attacking another inmate. The guy apparently said something about Dad's brother being a criminal too. Is he okay? Physically, yes, but Mom talked to his counselor. They're worried about his mental state. All that progress he'd made, it's gone. He's back to the angry, vengeful person he was before. Maybe worse. I felt a cold dread settling in my stomach. An angry Vincent with nothing left to lose was dangerous. An angry Vincent getting out in 3 years was terrifying. Sarah noticed my increased anxiety. He's still locked up, Shane. He can't hurt us from in there. But she was wrong. That same week, things started happening. First, our credit cards were maxed out with purchases we didn't make. Someone had gotten our information and run up thousands in charges. While we were dealing with that, our car insurance was canceled. Someone had called claiming to be me and requested cancellation. Then Tommy's school got a call claiming there was a family emergency, and he needed to be released to his uncle, who was coming to pick him up. Thankfully, the school followed protocol and called us first. None of it could be traced to Vincent. He was in solitary with no phone or computer access. But I knew he was behind it. He'd gotten someone on the outside to harass us. Probably one of his Highway Brotherhood friends who'd been released. Eugene helped me investigate, and we found the connection. Derek Thompson, released 6 months earlier after serving time for running a motorcyclist off the road in a rage incident. He'd been part of Vincent's prison group. Security footage from a bank ATM showed him using a cloned copy of our credit card. Derek was arrested, but he wouldn't give up Vincent. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. Vince is my friend, but I haven't talked to him since I got out. This was all my idea, sure it was. The harassment stopped after Derek's arrest, but the message was clear. Vincent could reach us even from prison. And if he could do this from solitary, what could he do when he got out? I started making plans, looking at jobs in other states, researching places we could move where Vincent wouldn't find us. Sarah was on board now. The credit card incident, and especially the attempt to get Tommy from school, had shaken her. Maybe Colorado, she suggested. My sister lives there. We'd have family nearby. Maybe, I said, but I wondered if anywhere would be far enough. Year 5 of Vincent's sentence brought another surprise. He found religion. Not Buddhism this time, but Christianity. He started writing letters to Rachel Torres, apologizing for traumatizing her, asking for forgiveness. He wrote to the prosecutor, to the judge, to anyone who would listen, professing his transformation. It's an act, I told Captain Barnes when she asked my opinion about his parole hearing prep. Vincent doesn't do genuine transformation. He does manipulation. But the parole board was impressed. Letters of support from the prison and chaplain, the warden, even some guards who said Vincent had become a positive influence on other inmates. His anger management counselor testified that he'd made remarkable progress. Only Marcus saw through it. He visited his father for the first time and called me after. It's fake, Officer Cooper. All of it. The religion, the remorse, everything. I looked in his eyes when I mentioned your name, and all that rage is still there. He's just learned to hide it better. Did he say anything about me? Not directly, but he asked about you, if you still lived in the same place, if you were still a trooper. When I wouldn't answer, he smiled and said, "It doesn't matter. Some things are meant to be." I reported all of this to the parole board, but reformed prisoners make for good statistics. Vincent was granted parole after serving 5.5 years of his 15-year sentence. The day before his release, I got one final letter from him. "Dear Shane," it read, dropping the formal Officer Cooper for the first time. "Tomorrow I rejoin society as a reformed man. I want you to know that I harbor no ill will toward you. You were doing your job that day on Highway 34, and I was in the wrong. I've learned to control my anger, to let go of past grievances. I hope you've been able to do the same. I plan to move to Iowa to live with a cousin and start fresh. You have nothing to fear from me. We need never cross paths again. I wish you and your family all the best. Sincerely, Vincent." It was the most threatening letter he'd ever sent, precisely because it tried so hard not to be threatening. Every word was calculated to sound reformed, while reminding me he was getting out. That night, I sat down with Sarah and Tommy, now 15 and taller than his mother. "We need to talk about Vincent Mallory," I said. Tommy knew the basics, but not the details. I explained everything, the threats, the harassment, the very real possibility that Vincent might come after us despite his claims of reformation. "So we're moving?" Tommy asked. He didn't sound upset, just resigned. He'd grown up with this shadow over our family. "I think we should," Sarah said. "Colorado's still hiring nurses, and Shane, you could get on with the state patrol there." I'd already applied, actually, already been accepted. I just hadn't told them yet. "When?" Tommy asked. "Soon. Before school starts in the fall. We spent the next month preparing, selling the house, packing, saying goodbye to friends without telling them the real reason we were leaving. Eugene was the only one who knew the truth. You sure about this, Shane? Running from this guy? I'm not running. I'm protecting my family. There's a difference. Is there? Or are you letting him win? I didn't have a good answer. We moved to Fort Collins, Colorado on July 15th, exactly 1 week after Vincent Mallory was released from prison. I'd already started with the Colorado State Patrol, working the I-25 corridor between Fort Collins and Denver. New badge number, new patrol area, new life. Or so we hoped. The first few months were good. Tommy adjusted to his new school, made the basketball team, even got a girlfriend. Sarah loved her new position at the medical center. I found the Colorado drivers to be generally calmer than Nebraska. Maybe it was the mountain air, or maybe the legal marijuana kept everyone mellow. Eugene kept me updated on Nebraska news. Vincent had indeed moved to Iowa, as he'd claimed, was working at an auto parts store, attending required therapy sessions, checking in with his parole officer. By all accounts, he was keeping his nose clean. Maybe he really has changed, Eugene said during one of our calls. Maybe, I said, but I didn't believe it. 6 months passed, then a year. No letters, no harassment, no signs of Vincent. I started to relax, started to believe we'd actually escaped. Then Marcus called. "Officer Cooper, I thought you should know. Dad's off parole, completed it early for good behavior. Where is he?" "Still in Iowa, as far as I know. But Shane, he's been asking about you again. My mom said he called her drunk last week, ranting about justice and unfinished business. Has he made any specific threats?" "No, nothing actionable. But the way he talks about you, it's like you're still all he thinks about." I increased security at our house, varied my routes again, told Sarah and Tommy to be extra vigilant. But what else could I do? Vincent hadn't committed any crimes. Having an obsession wasn't illegal. 2 months later, I was working a routine traffic stop on I-25 when I saw it. A black Ford F-150, same model Vincent had driven, passing slowly in the left lane. The driver turned to look at me as he passed, and for a moment I could have sworn it was Vincent. But when I looked again, it was just some random guy, probably wondering why a cop was staring at him. I was seeing Vincent everywhere, in crowds, in vehicles, in my rearview mirror. The paranoia he'd promised was delivered in full. Even hundreds of miles away, even with no contact for over a year, he was in my head. Sarah noticed. "You're jumpy again." Like when he first got arrested. "I know, I can't help it." "Shane, we can't live like this forever. Either he's coming or he's not, but we can't spend our whole lives waiting for him." She was right. I was letting Vincent control my life without him even being present. I decided to get therapy to deal with the hypervigilance and paranoia. Dr. Jennifer Mills, a specialist in law enforcement trauma, helped me understand what was happening. "You're experiencing a form of PTSD," she explained. "The constant threat, the harassment, the inability to feel safe, it's created a trauma response. Your brain is stuck in survival mode. How do I get unstuck? Time, therapy, and gradually reclaiming your sense of safety. Vincent Mallory can't hurt you if you don't let him. But what if he actually comes? What if the threat is real? Then you'll deal with it. But you can't live your life based on what-ifs." The therapy helped. I started sleeping better, stopped checking my mirrors obsessively, even went a whole day without thinking about Vincent. Progress. Then, on a humid July afternoon, exactly 3 years after the original incident, I pulled over a speeder on Highway 287, routine stop, out-of-state plates. As I approached the vehicle, the driver rolled down his window and my blood froze. It was Vincent. He looked different, thinner, older, gray in his beard. But those eyes were the same, still carrying that deep rage despite the smile on his face. "Hello, Shane. Fancy meeting you here." My hand went to my weapon, but Vincent kept his hands visible on the steering wheel. "Just passing through," he said calmly. "Heading to California to see my brother." He got out last month, you know. We're going to start fresh out there. License and registration, I managed to say, trying to keep my voice steady. He handed them over. California license, new address, the car registered in his brother's name. Everything legal. You were doing 70 in a 65, I said. Was I? My mistake. Getting old, I guess. Eyes aren't what they used to be. I ran his information. No warrants, no restrictions on travel. He was free to go wherever he wanted. Beautiful state, Colorado, Vincent said while we waited. You picked a nice place to run to. I didn't run. No? Nebraska to Colorado, right after I got out? Sounds like running to me. It was a career opportunity. He laughed. Sure it was. How's Tommy? Must be what, 18 now? About to graduate? The fact that he knew Tommy's age, that he'd been keeping track, made my skin crawl. Vincent, what are you doing here? I told you, passing through. I-70 was backed up with construction, so I took the scenic route. Pure coincidence running into you. We both knew it wasn't coincidence. He'd found me, tracked me down just to show me he could. His information came back clean. I had no legal reason to hold him. I'm giving you a warning for the speed, I said, handing back his documents. That's very generous, officer. Professional. Just like you were 3 years ago. Vincent, if I see you again, you'll what? Arrest me for driving on public roads? Harass me for exercising my constitutional rights? He smiled wider. I learned a lot in prison. Shane, learned about the law, about my rights, about what you can and can't do. I'm not that angry, impulsive man anymore. Then what are you? Patient. I'm very, very patient. He started his engine. Take care, Shane. Give my regards to your family. Oh, and Shane? That new house of yours? The one on Maple Street? You might want to trim those hedges by the back gate. They're getting overgrown. Someone could hide in them. He drove away before I could respond, leaving me standing on the side of the highway, shaking with rage and fear. He knew where we lived. He'd been to our house. I called it in immediately, but what could anyone do? He hadn't made a direct threat, hadn't committed any crime. Knowing someone's address wasn't illegal. Driving through Colorado wasn't illegal. I raced home, found Sarah and Tommy safe, the house undisturbed. But there, by the back gate, pressed into the dirt, was a fresh footprint. He'd been here. We installed more cameras, motion sensors, even got a dog. A German shepherd named Max, who was trained in protection. Tommy, now old enough to understand the full situation, got his concealed carry permit. Sarah took self-defense classes. We became a fortress. But Vincent never came back. Instead, he played a different game. Every few months, I'd spot his vehicle in random places. Outside a restaurant where we were eating, driving past Tommy's school, parked at a rest stop where I'd stopped. Never close enough to be considered stalking, never long enough to be harassment. Just enough to let me know he was watching. Eugene thought I should retire, move somewhere else, change our names even. He's never going to stop, Shane. This is his life now, tormenting you. But I was done running. No, this is my home, my life. If he wants to waste his following me around, that's his choice. But I'm not giving him any more power over me. The breaking point came a year later. Tommy was away at college, Colorado State, staying close to home. Sarah and I were at a fundraiser for the hospital when Vincent walked in. He was dressed nicely, had a date with him, acted like any other donor. When he saw us, he waved casually as if we were old friends. Sarah grabbed my arm, terrified. "We're leaving," she whispered. "No," I said, "we're not." We stayed, watched Vincent work the room. Charm people, He even bid on silent auction items. He was showing me he could be anywhere, any time, that he could invade any part of our lives. When the evening ended, he approached us by the coat check. "Shane, Sarah, lovely event. I had no idea you were supporters of the hospital. My date's a nurse here, small world." His date, a woman in her 40s, smiled uncomfortably, clearly unaware of the history. "Vincent," I said simply. "I wanted you to know," he said quietly while his date got their coats, "that I'm moving to Colorado. Got a job at a shop in Denver. We'll be neighbors. Isn't that nice?" "Vincent." "All legal, Shane. I'm allowed to live wherever I want, work wherever I want, go wherever I want. As long as I don't break any laws, you can't do anything. And I'm never going to break the law again. But I am going to be around, forever. Every happy moment of your life, you'll wonder if I'm watching. Every bad moment, you'll wonder if I caused it. That's my revenge." He left with his date, leaving Sarah and me standing there. That night, Sarah gave me an ultimatum. Either he goes or I do. I can't live like this, Shane. The constant fear, the stalking, it's killing me. What do you want me to do? Kill him? I want you to end this, however you have to. I knew what she was implying, and for the first time I seriously considered it. Vincent had made it clear he would never stop. The law couldn't help us. Maybe there was only one solution. But then Marcus called. Vincent's son, now a police officer himself in Kansas. Officer Cooper, my dad's sick. Liver cancer, stage 4. The doctors give him maybe 6 months. Is this real? I saw the scans myself. It's real. He's dying. The news should have brought relief, but it didn't. A dying Vincent with nothing to lose was even more dangerous than a healthy one. Is he getting treatment? He refused it, said he wants to die on his own terms. Vincent called me himself a week later. "Hello, Shane. I suppose you heard about my condition." I did. Funny how life works out. All that planning, all that patience, and my own body betrays me. But Shane, I want you to know something. I'm not going to waste my last months making your life miserable. I don't believe you. I don't expect you to. But it's true. I've made my peace with everything, even with you. Then leave us alone. I will. After one last thing. I want to meet with you, face to face. No weapons, no threats, no games. Just 2 men talking. After that, you'll never see me again. Why would I agree to that? Because if you don't, I'll spend my last months making sure your son never feels safe at college, making sure your wife never feels safe at work. You know I can do it, or you can give me 1 hour and it all ends. I agreed to meet him at a public park in Fort Collins. Broad daylight, lots of witnesses. Eugene came as backup, staying visible but distant. Vincent looked terrible. The cancer had eaten away at him, left him gaunt and pale. He could barely walk to the bench where I waited. "Thank you for coming," he said, breathing heavily. "What do you want, Vincent?" "To explain, to apologize, to end this properly. Then talk." He looked at the mountains in the distance. "You know what I realized when they told me I was dying? That I'd wasted my entire life on anger. Every moment spent tracking you, planning revenge, feeding my rage, all wasted. I could have rebuilt my relationship with my kids, started a new business, found love again. Instead, I chose hate. That was your choice. Yes, it was. And Shane, I need you to know, it was never really about you. You were just the last in a long line of people who made me feel powerless. The difference was, I could identify you, track you, focus all that rage on you. You terrorized my family. I did, and I'm sorry. Not expecting forgiveness, just stating fact, I'm sorry." We sat in silence for a moment. The road rage that started all this, he continued. Rachel really did cut me off. But my reaction was insane. I see that now. A normal person would have honked, maybe cursed, then moved on. But I couldn't. Because moving on would mean accepting that I didn't matter, that my anger didn't matter. Your anger never mattered, Vincent. Only what you did with it. I know that now. Too late, but I know. He pulled out an envelope, handed it to me. My will. I'm leaving what little I have to a victims fund for people affected by road rage violence. It's not much, but it's something. Why are you really here, Vincent? He looked at me directly for the first time, to see if you'll forgive me. Not for me, for you. Carrying hate is like drinking poison. I should know, it's killing me faster than the cancer. I thought about all the years of fear, the paranoia, the disruption to our lives, the therapy bills, the security systems, the constant vigilance. I can't forgive you, Vincent. Not yet, maybe not ever. He nodded. Fair enough. But Shane, do me one favor. Don't let what I did to you turn you into me. Don't let the anger consume you. Don't spend your life looking backward. He stood with difficulty. You'll never see me again. That's a promise I'll keep. Vincent died 2 months later. Marcus called to tell me. Said his father's last words were, "Tell Cooper I'm sorry." The funeral was small. Marcus, his mother, a few relatives. I didn't go, but I sent flowers. The card read simply, "Rest in peace." Sarah and I went to therapy together, working through the trauma of those years. Tommy came home from college one weekend and we talked about it as a family. The fear, the anger, the relief, and the strange emptiness now that Vincent was gone. "Do you forgive him?" Tommy asked me. "I'm working on it, not for him, but for us, for me." He was right about one thing, Sarah said. The anger is poison. We can't let it define us. I returned to regular patrol duty, no longer looking over my shoulder, no longer seeing Vincent in every black truck. But I carry the lessons with me. Every traffic stop, I remember that the person I'm pulling over might be having the worst day of their life. Every citation I write, I think about the ripple effects it might cause. I've become a better cop, more empathetic, more aware of the human being behind the violation. I still patrol I-25, dealing with speeders and drunk drivers and, yes, road rage incidents. When I encounter someone consumed by that familiar fury, I try to de-escalate not just for safety, but because I've seen where that rage leads. Last month, I pulled over a man who'd been aggressively tailgating another vehicle. He was furious, ranting about being disrespected, about other drivers thinking they owned the road. 3 years ago, I would have just written the ticket and moved on. Instead, I talked to him. "Sir, I understand you're frustrated. But let me tell you a story about where this kind of anger leads." I told him about Vincent, about the years of terror, the waste of life, the pointlessness of it all. The man listened, his anger slowly deflating. "I don't want to be that guy," he said quietly. "Then don't be. Let it go, move on. Life's too short for road rage." He thanked me, genuinely thanked me, and drove away calmly. Maybe I saved him from becoming another Vincent. Maybe I saved some innocent driver from years of harassment. Maybe I just helped one person have a better day. Eugene, retired last year, said he'd had enough of the highway wars. At his retirement party, he pulled me aside. "You know what, Shane? Vincent Mallory made you a better cop. Vincent Mallory nearly destroyed my life. Yeah, but you survived, and you learned. And now you use that knowledge to help others. That's victory. Maybe he's right. Maybe surviving Vincent and choosing not to become him is its own kind of victory." I drive past the park where we had our last meeting sometimes. I think about forgiveness, about waste, about the thin line between justice and revenge. Vincent spent years trying to destroy me, and in the end destroyed himself. I spent years fearing him, and in the end learned to fear the anger in myself more. The highways stretch on, endless under the Colorado sun. I patrol them still, watching for danger, helping where I can, trying to interrupt the cycle of rage that Vincent embodied. Every angry driver I calm down, every confrontation I de-escalate, feels like a small victory against the memory of Vincent Mallory. His gravestone reads, Vincent Paul Mallory, 1977 to 2024. May he find the peace that eluded him in life. I visited it once, alone. Not to forgive, not to forget, but to acknowledge the end of our strange, violent connection. I left a single flower, not out of respect, but out of recognition that even the worst of us are human, and every human death diminishes us all. The road rage that started everything seems so small now, so pointless. A moment of anger on a hot July day that spiraled into years of hatred and fear. Rachel Torres moved on with her life, probably never thinks about that day, but for Vincent and me, it defined years of our existence. That's the real tragedy, not the violence or the fear, but the waste. All that energy spent on revenge and protection, attack and defense, when we could have just moved on. But some people can't move on. They get stuck in that moment of rage, reliving it, feeding it, letting it consume them. I'm not stuck anymore. Vincent is gone, and with him, the constant threat that defined so much of my life. But the lessons remain. Every shift, every stop, every interaction is a chance to prevent another spiral, another tragedy, another waste. The radio crackles, another call, another situation that could go either way. Unit 23 responding, I say, and drive toward whatever comes next, carrying the weight of experience and the hope that maybe, just maybe, I can keep someone else from becoming trapped in the prison of their own rage. Because that's what Vincent taught me in the end, that the real prison isn't the one with bars and walls. It's the one we build in our minds when we can't let go of anger. He died in that prison, but I got free. The fog rolled in thick that October evening, turning Highway 231 into a tunnel of mist and uncertainty. I'd been patrolling this stretch of Alabama highway for 16 years, and autumn fog was as predictable as summer heat. But something about this particular night felt different. Maybe it was the unusual stillness in the air, or maybe after all these years, a trooper develops a sixth sense for when a shift is about to go sideways. My name is Austin Barrett, Alabama State Trooper, Badge 447. I work the night shifts by choice these days, covering the rural highways between Montgomery and Wetumpka. The divorce 3 years ago had left me preferring the solitude of empty roads to the forced cheerfulness of day shift small talk. Out here, especially after midnight, it's just you, the asphalt, and whatever secrets the darkness holds. That night, October 15th, 2020, I was running speed enforcement on a particularly dangerous curve where Highway 231 meets County Road 73. We'd had 3 fatal accidents there in the past year, all involving excessive speed and that sharp turn that seems to surprise drivers who aren't local. I'd already written 2 citations and given 1 warning when the call came through at 11:47 p.m. Unit 19, this is dispatch. We have a welfare check request, priority 2. I picked up the radio, adjusting my position in the driver's seat. Unit 19, go ahead with details. Elderly male, Harold Pritchard, age 74, residing at 2847 County Road 73. Caller is his neighbor, Joyce Henderson. She reports not seeing Mr. Pritchard for 5 days, mail piling up, vehicle hasn't moved. She's attempted contact multiple times with no response. County Road 73 was just off my current position, maybe 3 miles down a winding path through dense pine forest. I knew the area well enough to know that properties out there were spread far apart, the kind of places where people moved specifically to avoid neighbors. A welfare check on an elderly person after 5 days of no contact wasn't unusual, but it was concerning. Copy dispatch. Any medical history or prior calls to that address? Checking. Mr. Pritchard is a Vietnam veteran. Wife deceased 2018. 1 prior call in 2019, medical assist for a fall, transported and released. No other history. Neighbor states he usually waves when she passes, very routine-oriented. Veterans living alone always warranted extra attention in my book. Too many of them suffered in silence, too proud to ask for help, until it was too late. I'd done enough welfare checks over the years to know that the routine-oriented ones were actually the most concerning when they broke pattern. Unit 19 responding. ETA approximately 5 minutes. Copy Unit 19. Neighbor is waiting at the location. I pulled onto County Road 73, my headlights cutting through the fog that seemed to thicken with every mile from the highway. The road was poorly maintained, more patches than original asphalt, with no center line and barely enough width for 2 vehicles to pass. The county had been promising to repave it for 3 years, but rural roads were always last priority. The Pritchard property was marked by a rusted mailbox that had seen better days. The numbers 2847 barely visible in reflective tape that was peeling at the corners. The driveway was gravel, about 200 yards long, disappearing into a grove of massive oak trees that had to be at least a century old. As I turned in, my headlights illuminated a silver Honda Civic parked near the mailbox with its hazard lights on. A woman got out as I approached, probably mid-60s, wearing a quilted jacket over what looked like nurse's scrubs. She walked toward my cruiser with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested someone used to being in charge. I recognized the type immediately. Retired medical professional. Probably the unofficial caretaker for half the elderly residents in the area. "Officer Barrett," she called out as I exited my vehicle. "Yes, ma'am. You must be Miss Henderson. Joyce, please." "Thank you for coming so quickly. I'm really worried about Harold. This just isn't like him at all." I grabbed my flashlight and notepad, studying Joyce Henderson in the cruiser's headlights. She seemed genuinely concerned, wringing her hands in that unconscious way people do when they're anxious. Her face showed the kind of worry that came from real care, not just nosiness. "When did you last see Mr. Pritchard, Joyce?" "Wednesday morning, October 10th. He was on his porch having coffee, waved like always when I drove past heading to town. I work part-time at the Wetumpka Medical Center, and I always pass by around 7 a.m. Harold's always on that porch with his coffee, regular as clockwork, but Thursday morning he wasn't there. I didn't think much of it at first, figured maybe he had an appointment or something. But then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, nothing. His truck hasn't moved, mail's overflowing, and those newspapers—" She pointed toward the house, though it wasn't visible from where we stood. "Have you tried calling him? Harold doesn't have a phone. Says he got enough of radio communication in Vietnam, doesn't need any more voices in his house. I've knocked on his door 3 times now, yesterday and today. Even went around back, but everything's locked up tight." I nodded, making notes. The lack of phone wasn't unusual for older rural residents, especially veterans who preferred isolation. But it made welfare checks more complicated. No way to attempt contact before forcing entry, if it came to that. "Does Mr. Pritchard have any family?" Anyone who might know his whereabouts? Joyce shook her head, her expression growing sadder. His wife Linda died of cancer 2 years ago. They never had children. There's a nephew somewhere up in Birmingham, but Harold mentioned they hadn't spoken in years. Some family dispute about Linda's treatment, I think. Harold's pretty much alone out here. Any health issues you're aware of? He's remarkably healthy for his age, actually. Still, chops his own wood, maintains that old truck himself. Though, she paused, seeming to weigh whether to continue. What is it? Well, about a month ago, Harold mentioned he'd been having trouble sleeping. Said he was having dreams about Vietnam again, which apparently hadn't happened in years. I suggested he talk to someone at the VA, but you know how these old-timers are. They'd rather suffer than admit they need help. PTSD flare-ups weren't uncommon in elderly veterans. Retirement, isolation, the loss of a spouse, health concerns. Even changes in weather could trigger episodes that had been dormant for decades. It added another layer of concern to the situation. Joyce, I'm going to check on Mr. Pritchard. I need you to stay here by your vehicle for safety. If I need assistance, I'll signal you. Of course. Officer Barrett. I have a bad feeling about this. Harold's a creature of habit. For him to break his routine like this, something's wrong. I drove up the gravel driveway, the sound of rocks pinging against the undercarriage loud in the quiet night. The fog was thinner under the oak canopy, but the darkness was almost complete, my headlights creating a tunnel of light ahead. The driveway curved twice before opening into a clearing where the house sat. It was a modest, single-story ranch, probably built in the 1970s, with vinyl siding that had once been white, but had aged to a dingy gray. A covered porch ran the length of the front, with 2 rocking chairs positioned to face the driveway. Harold's truck, a 1995 Ford F-150 in faded blue, sat under a carport attached to the right side of the house. As Joyce had said, newspapers were scattered on the porch, still in their plastic bags. I counted 5 of them. The porch light was off, unusual for a rural property where that light was often the only crime deterrent. But there was a faint glow from inside the house, possibly from a back room. I parked my cruiser strategically, angled so the headlights illuminated the front door while giving me cover if needed. I approached the house carefully, my hand instinctively resting near my service weapon. 16 years of experience had taught me that welfare checks could go sideways quickly. You never knew what you might find: a medical emergency, a crime scene, a confused elderly person with a weapon, or, sometimes, worst of all, someone who'd been dead for days. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not the smell of death. I knew that odor too well, but something else. Chemical, like cleaning products, but mixed with something organic and sweet. It was faint but distinct, seeming to come from the house itself. I knocked firmly on the front door, using my flashlight to tap loudly. "Mr. Pritchard, this is Trooper Barrett with the Alabama State Police. We're conducting a welfare check. Your neighbor is concerned about you." Silence, not even the sound of a television or radio from inside. I knocked again, harder this time. "Harold Pritchard?" "Sir, I need you to respond if you can hear me. Just let me know you're okay." Nothing. But then I heard something, or thought I did. A faint sound from inside, like something being moved or shifted. It was hard to tell over the sound of crickets and the distant hum of insects that filled the Alabama night. I tried the doorknob, locked, as expected. I walked around the left side of the house, my flashlight beam sweeping across windows. All the curtains were drawn tight, unusual for someone living alone in a rural area. Most folks out here didn't bother with curtains. especially Harold's generation, who figured privacy came from distance, not fabric. The side of the house revealed nothing useful, all windows locked and covered. But as I rounded to the back, my flashlight caught something odd on the ground. Lines of what looked like salt or white powder across the back door threshold and along the windowsills. My grandmother used to do something similar, an old Southern tradition meant to keep evil out. But this looked fresh, recently laid. The back door was solid wood with a deadbolt, no glass to peer through. I continued my circuit of the house, finding more of those salt lines at every potential entry point. Someone had methodically sealed every door and window with these barriers. The question was whether they were trying to keep something out or keep something in. Returning to the front, I had a decision to make. I had an elderly resident who hadn't been seen in 5 days, hadn't collected mail or newspapers, whose vehicle hadn't moved, and who wasn't responding to repeated attempts at contact. The strange salt lines and chemical smell added to my concern. In my judgment, these circumstances justified forced entry for a welfare check. I returned to Joyce, who was still waiting anxiously by her car. "Ma'am, Mr. Pritchard isn't responding, and given the circumstances, I'm going to make entry to check on his welfare. I need you to stay here. If you hear me call for help, call 911 immediately." "Oh God, you think something's happened to him?" "I don't know yet, ma'am. But I need to check. Do you know if Harold owns any firearms? He has his service rifle from Vietnam, I think. Saw it once when I helped Linda clean out their garage for a yard sale. But Harold's not violent, officer. He's the gentlest soul you'd ever meet. Gentle souls could still be dangerous when confused or frightened, especially combat veterans with PTSD. I returned to my cruiser and called dispatch. "Dispatch, Unit 19. I'm making forced entry for welfare check at 2847 County Road, 73. Resident unresponsive, 5 days of no contact. Send a backup unit to my location. Copy Unit 19. Unit 7 is en route. ETA approximately 15 minutes. 15 minutes was a long time if something went wrong, but typical for rural response times. I couldn't wait. If Harold was having a medical emergency, every minute counted. I retrieved the ram from my trunk, a small battering ram we carried for forced entries. The front door was solid, but the frame was old wood that had seen decades of Alabama humidity. It gave way on the third strike, the door swinging inward with a crack of splintering wood. The smell hit me immediately, much stronger now. Definitely chemicals. Bleach, ammonia, something else I couldn't identify, and underneath it that sweet stomach turn slightly. I drew my weapon, holding it at low ready, and stepped into the house. "Mr. Pritchard, State Police. I'm entering your home to check on your welfare. Please respond if you can hear me." The living room was to my right, dimly lit by a single lamp in the corner. What I saw made me pause. The room was immaculate, but not just clean. It was arranged with military precision. Every book on the shelf was aligned perfectly, spines exactly even. Magazines on the coffee table were fanned out at precise angles. Even the throw pillows on the couch were positioned with mathematical exactness. But it was the walls that truly caught my attention. They were covered in maps, dozens of them. Some looked military, tactical maps with markings and notations. Others were local, showing the area around the house with various points marked in red ink. And there were lists, written in neat handwriting, dates and times and observations. October 1st, 0800 hours. Unfamiliar vehicle passed. White sedan, partial plate. October 3rd, 1430 hours. Joyce stopped, normal check-in, stayed 12 minutes. Harold had been conducting surveillance on his own property, documenting every movement, every visitor. The detail was obsessive. paranoid even. This wasn't just PTSD. This was someone in a serious mental health crisis. I moved deeper into the house, weapon still drawn but pointed down. The hallway was dark, but I could see light coming from under a door at the end, probably the master bedroom. The chemical smell was strongest here, making my eyes water slightly. "Harold, it's Trooper Barrett. I'm here to help. Please let me know you're okay." A sound from behind the bedroom door, definite movement now. Someone was in there. I approached carefully, noting that towels had been stuffed under the door, sealing the gap. The doorknob had some kind of substance smeared on it, more salt or powder. Someone had tried very hard to seal this room. I tried the knob, locked from the inside. "Mr. Pritchard, I need you to unlock this door. I'm here to help you." The movement stopped. Then, very faintly, I heard a voice. Weak, raspy, but definitely human. "Go. Away." Relief flooded through me. He was alive. "Mr. Pritchard, I can't do that. Your neighbor is worried about you. You haven't been seen in 5 days. I need to make sure you're okay. Not safe." The voice was stronger now, but filled with fear. "They're coming." "Who's coming, Harold?" "You're safe. I'm a state trooper. Let me help you." "You can't stop them. No one can." This was definitely a mental health crisis. Harold was paranoid, possibly delusional, but he was alive and talking, which meant I could potentially de-escalate without forcing entry to the bedroom. "Harold, my name is Austin Barrett. I'm alone except for Joyce, your neighbor. There's no one else here. You're safe. Can you unlock the door so we can talk face to face?" There was a long silence. Then I heard movement again, shuffling footsteps approaching the door. The lock clicked, but the door didn't open. "Harold?" "Step back," his voice said. "Need to see you're real." I stepped back from the door, keeping my weapon holstered but ready. The door opened a crack, and I saw an eye peering out, bloodshot, exhausted, fearful. "It's just me, Harold. Trooper Barrett. Can I come in?" The door opened wider, revealing Harold Pritchard. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, maybe longer. His clothes were disheveled, stained with sweat. He was thin, much thinner than a man his age should be, and he was holding something in his right hand. Not a weapon, but what looked like a rosary or prayer beads. "You're real?" he asked, his voice uncertain. "Yes, sir, I'm real." "Harold, when's the last time you ate something?" "Had some water?" He looked confused by the question, as if eating and drinking were foreign concepts. "Don't know. Days. Been watching. Waiting." "Waiting for what, Harold?" His eyes darted around the room behind him, then back to me. "For them. They come at night, through the walls, through the air. I sealed everything, but they still get in. Harold, there's no one here but us. You're having an episode. It might be related to your PTSD. We need to get you some help." "No." He stepped back, fear flashing across his face. "No hospitals. No doctors. That's where they are. That's where they wait." I needed to calm him down, get him talking rationally. "Okay, no hospitals. How about we just sit and talk for a bit? Joyce is really worried about you." At the mention of Joyce, his expression changed slightly. Some recognition, some connection to reality. "Joyce, she's good. She brings cookies sometimes. Reminded me of Linda." "That's right." "Joyce cares about you. She called us because she was worried. Can we sit down? You look tired." He nodded slowly and moved back into the bedroom. I followed, finally getting a full view of the space. It was like entering another world. The room had been transformed into some kind of bunker or safe room. Aluminum foil covered the windows completely. More salt lines crossed the floor in patterns. Food supplies were stacked in one corner, canned goods, water bottles, MRES that looked military issue. And on every surface were more of those detailed logs, documenting sounds, sights, even smells. But what concerned me most was Harold himself. Up close, I could see he was dehydrated, malnourished. His hands shook with exhaustion or low blood sugar. This man needed medical attention, whether he wanted it or not. Harold, when did this start? When did you first see them? He sat on the edge of his bed, still clutching those beads. 2 weeks ago, maybe 3, times hard. Started with sounds at night, footsteps outside, whispers. Then I saw shadows moving where shadows shouldn't be. They're watching me, learning my patterns. Why would anyone be watching you, Harold? Because I know things. From the war. Things they don't want revealed. His voice dropped to a whisper. Operation Blackwater, November 1969. We weren't supposed to be there. Weren't supposed to see what we saw. I recognized this pattern. Many veterans with PTSD created elaborate narratives to explain their symptoms, mixing real memories with paranoid delusions. The key was not to challenge the delusion directly, but to work within it to get them help. Harold, you're exhausted. When's the last time you slept? Can't sleep. That's when they come, when I'm vulnerable. What if I stayed here while you rested? I could watch for them, keep you safe. He looked at me with such desperate hope that it broke my heart. This wasn't just an elderly man having an episode. This was a veteran who'd served his country, lost his wife, and was now losing his battle with his own mind. You'd do that? Harold asked, his voice barely above a whisper. You'd keep watch? That's what I'm here for, Harold. To protect and serve. But first, we need to get some water in you. When did you last drink something? He looked at the water bottles stacked in the corner as if seeing them for the first time. Yesterday, maybe. Hard to remember. Afraid they might have poisoned the water. I walked over to the supplies, picked up an unopened bottle, and made a show of checking the seal. Then I opened it myself and took a small sip before handing it to him. It's safe, Harold. I promise. He took the bottle with shaking hands and drank deeply, desperately. It was clear he'd been dangerously dehydrated. As he drank, I heard my radio crackle. Unit 19, this is Unit 7. I'm pulling up to your location now. That would be Deputy Marcus Thompson, a good officer I'd worked with before. His arrival might complicate things with Harold's paranoid state, but I needed the backup. Harold, another officer, is arriving. Deputy Thompson, he's here to help too. Is that okay? Fear flashed across Harold's face again. How do I know he's real? How do I know he's not one of them? Because I called for him myself. He's been a deputy for 8 years, has 2 kids, coaches Little League. He's as real as I am. Harold nodded reluctantly, but I could see his grip tighten on those prayer beads. I stepped out of the bedroom to meet Thompson at the front door, keeping my voice low. Marcus, we've got a Vietnam vet in severe mental health crisis. Paranoid delusions, hasn't eaten or slept properly in days, possibly weeks. He's nonviolent, but extremely frightened. We need to get him medical attention, but he's refusing hospitals. Thompson, a steady officer in his 40s with prematurely gray hair, nodded understanding. PTSD episode? Looks like it. He's convinced someone's after him, has been barricading himself in. The whole house is sealed with salt lines like some kind of protection ritual. My uncle was the same way after Desert Storm, Thompson said quietly. Took us 3 days to talk him into getting help. What's your play? Build trust, get him stabilized enough to transport. Maybe Joyce can help. He seems to respond positively to her. Can you check on her, maybe bring her up to the house? But brief her first on his condition. Thompson headed back down the driveway while I returned to Harold. He'd moved from the bed to a chair positioned where he could see both the door and the window, despite the foil covering. The water bottle was empty, which was good. Harold, can you tell me more about Operation Blackwater? Sometimes talking about it helps. He looked at me suspiciously, then seemed to decide I was trustworthy enough. Classified operation, Laos border. We weren't supposed to be there. Congress didn't know. November 12th, 1969. My unit was doing recon when we stumbled onto something, a meeting between NVA officers and others. Others? Americans. CIA, maybe, or contractors. They were making deals, Harold. Trading. Weapons. Information. We watched them shake hands over the bodies of dead villagers. His hands were trembling more violently now. Sergeant told us to forget what we saw. Said it never happened. But I remembered. I always remembered. Whether this was a real memory or a delusion didn't matter at the moment. What mattered was that Harold believed it, and it was clearly the source of his current paranoia. That must have been hard to carry all these years. Linda knew. I told her everything before we married. Said she deserved to know what kind of man I was. She said it didn't matter, that I was a good man who'd seen bad things. Tears were forming in his eyes. God, I miss her. She'd know what to do. She always knew what to do. Tell me about Linda. His expression softened immediately. Met her at a dance in Montgomery, 1971. Just back from the war, angry at everything, drinking too much. She was there with friends, wearing this yellow dress that made her look like sunshine. Asked me to dance even though I was just standing in the corner looking mean. As he talked about Linda, I saw glimpses of the real Harold beneath the paranoia and exhaustion. A man who'd loved deeply, lived quietly, and was now lost without his anchor. I kept him talking about Linda, their life together. Anything to keep him grounded in reality rather than his delusions. After about 20 minutes, I heard footsteps on the porch. Thompson appeared in the doorway with Joyce beside him. Harold tensed immediately, but when he saw Joyce, something in him relaxed. "Harold," Joyce said softly, her voice full of genuine concern. "Oh, honey, look at you. You look exhausted." "Joyce." His voice cracked. "You're real. You're really here." "Of course I'm real, Harold. I've been so worried about you." She moved into the room slowly, non-threatening, like approaching a wounded animal. "When's the last time you had a proper meal?" "Don't know. The food might be compromised." Joyce looked at me, understanding immediately what we were dealing with. She'd been a nurse. She'd seen this before. "Harold, what if I made you something? Right here where you can watch me. Would you eat then?" He considered this, his tired mind trying to process whether this was safe. "Maybe, if I can watch." "Deputy Thompson," I said, "could you go with Miss Amy Henderson to the kitchen?" "Harold, we'll make you something simple. Soup, maybe. You can watch everything." We spent the next hour slowly stabilizing Harold. Joyce heated up some canned soup, making sure Harold could see every step. He ate slowly, suspiciously at first, then with more appetite as his body remembered hunger. Thompson and I took turns, keeping watch at the windows, playing into his delusion while trying to keep him calm. As Harold ate, I noticed something on his arm. Fresh scratches, some infected looking. "Harold, what happened to your arms?" He looked down as if surprised. "Must have happened when I was securing the perimeter. The thorns, you know. Or maybe they got closer than I thought." The scratches looked self-inflicted, probably from his paranoid episodes. They needed medical attention, but I couldn't push too hard yet. "Joyce," I said quietly, "those cuts need to be cleaned." "Do you think—" She nodded, already moving. "Harold, honey, those scratches look nasty. Let me clean them up for you. I've got supplies in my car. I always keep a first aid kit." While Joyce tended to Harold's wounds, I stepped outside with Thompson to discuss our options. The moon had risen, casting silver light through the fog that still clung to the tree line. The October night had grown cold, that particular Alabama cold that creeps into your bones. "We need to get him to a hospital," Thompson said. "He's in bad shape." "I know, but he won't go voluntarily. And involuntary commitment requires him to be an immediate danger to himself or others. Right now, he's just scared and confused. Those scratches look self-inflicted. Isn't that enough? Maybe. But if we force it and he fights, it could make things worse. Let me call dispatch, see if we can get a mental health crisis counselor out here." I made the call, but the nearest crisis counselor was in Montgomery, at least an hour away if they were even available. Rural Alabama didn't have the resources for mental health emergencies that cities did. We were mostly on our own. When I went back inside, Joyce had cleaned and bandaged Harold's arms. He looked better, more present, though still exhausted. The food and water were helping, bringing him back from the edge somewhat. "Harold," I said, sitting down across from him, "you need proper rest. And those cuts need professional medical attention. Some of them look infected. I told you, no hospitals. What about the VA clinic in Montgomery? It's not a hospital, just a clinic. They know how to help veterans who are struggling." He shook his head, but I could see him wavering. The paranoia was fighting, with exhaustion and the basic human need for help. "Harold," Joyce said gently, "what would Linda want you to do?" That stopped him. He looked at Joyce with such pain in his eyes that it was hard to watch. She'd want me to get help. She always said I was too stubborn for my own good. She was right, wasn't she? You are stubborn, but you're also strong enough to ask for help when you need it. Harold was quiet for a long moment, then looked at me. "If I go, will you stay with me? Make sure they're really doctors. I'll escort you personally, Harold. Deputy Thompson will follow in your truck so you have it when you're ready to come home. And Joyce? I'll come visit you every day," Joyce promised. "Bring you some of my famous chocolate chip cookies, the ones Linda's recipe inspired, remember?" Harold finally nodded, the fight going out of him. "Okay, but if they're not real doctors, if they're part of it—" "They're real, Harold. I promise you, they're real and they want to help." Getting Harold ready to leave took another hour. He insisted on packing certain items, his military documents, a photo of Linda, those prayer beads. He sealed up his house with an elaborate ritual, involving checking every window and door 3 times. Throughout it all, Thompson and I remained patient. This wasn't just about getting him medical care. It was about preserving whatever dignity and control he had left. As we prepared to leave, Harold stopped at his front door and looked back at his house. "I built that back deck myself," he said quietly. "Linda wanted somewhere to watch the birds. Took me 3 months, but I got it just right. She loved sitting out there in the mornings. It's a beautiful deck, Harold. It'll be here when you get back. Will it? Will anything be the same?" I didn't have an answer for that. Mental health treatment might help him, but it might also fundamentally change how he saw the world. All I could do was hope it would be a change for the better. The drive to the VA clinic in Montgomery took 45 minutes. Harold sat in the back of my cruiser, not because he was under arrest, but because he felt safer there. He clutched his photo of Linda and occasionally muttered to himself, but remained calm. Joyce followed in her Honda, and Thompson brought up the rear in Harold's truck. The fog had lifted by the time we reached the city limits, replaced by the glow of streetlights and the bustle of late-night Montgomery. Harold grew more agitated as we entered the city, the lights and activity overwhelming after his self-imposed isolation. "Too many people," he muttered. "Too many places to hide." "Almost there, Harold." Just a few more minutes. The VA clinic had a 24-hour psychiatric emergency entrance, a small blessing in a system that often failed veterans. I'd called ahead, explaining the situation, and they were ready for us. A young psychiatrist, Dr. James Mitchell, met us at the entrance. He was calm, professional, and most importantly, had experience with combat-related PTSD. "Mr. Pritchard, I'm Dr. Mitchell. I served in Afghanistan before I became a doctor. I understand what you're going through." Harold studied him suspiciously. "Afghanistan? What unit?" 101st Airborne, 2nd Brigade. Did my tour in 2009. Something in Harold relaxed slightly. A fellow veteran, someone who might actually understand. It was the first real breakthrough since we'd found him. The admission process was slow and careful. Dr. Mitchell took his time, never rushing Harold, always explaining what was happening and why. Joyce and I stayed as promised, vouching for the reality of the situation whenever Harold's paranoia flared. It was nearly 4 a.m. when Harold was finally admitted to the psychiatric ward for evaluation and treatment. He looked small in the hospital gown, vulnerable in a way that his paranoid vigilance had hidden. Before they took him to his room, he grabbed my hand. "Officer Barrett, you'll check on my house? Make sure they don't get in while I'm gone. I'll drive by every shift, Harold. Your house will be safe. And you'll tell people. You'll tell them I'm not crazy, just had a bad spell? You're not crazy, Harold. You're a veteran who's been through more than most people can imagine. You're getting help, and that takes courage." He nodded, then allowed the orderly to lead him away. Joyce was crying quietly, and even Thompson looked affected. We'd spent hours with Harold, seen him at his most vulnerable, and somehow we'd all become invested in his recovery. Outside the clinic, as dawn was breaking over Montgomery, Joyce thanked us. "You handled that so well. Most cops would have just dragged him out." "He didn't need dragging out," I said. "He needed understanding. Besides, that's part of the job people don't see. It's not all traffic stops and arrests. Sometimes it's just helping someone who's lost find their way back." "Will he be okay?" she asked. "I hope so. The VA has good programs for PTSD. With medication and therapy, he might be able to manage it, but he'll need support when he gets out. He'll need to know he's not alone." Joyce nodded firmly. "He won't be. Linda would never forgive me if I let him face this alone. That's what neighbors do, right? We look out for each other." As I drove back to my patrol area, the sun rising over the Alabama countryside, I thought about Harold and all the veterans like him scattered across these rural counties. Men and women who'd served their country, came home broken, and tried to hold themselves together with pure willpower until they couldn't anymore. My radio crackled with a routine traffic stop request, pulling me back to the regular world of state trooper duties, but I made a mental note to check on Harold's house that evening, to keep my promise. Because sometimes the most important part of law enforcement isn't enforcing the law at all. It's just keeping the promises you make to people who have no one else to trust. 2 weeks passed before I saw Harold again. True to my word, I'd driven by his house every shift, checking that everything remained secure. Joyce had been going daily to air out the place and collect mail. The house stood empty but waiting, like it knew its owner would return. During those 2 weeks, I couldn't shake Harold's story about Operation Blackwater. Something about the specificity of his details, the date, the location, nagged at me. On my day off, I found myself at the library in Montgomery, searching through old newspaper archives and declassified military documents. Most Vietnam operations from that period were still classified or heavily redacted, but I found enough to make me wonder. There had been a Sergeant William Blackwater who served in the area Harold mentioned. He died in 1985 in what was listed as a hunting accident. 3 other members of his unit had died in the following years: car accident, suicide, overdose. Only Harold and 1 other man, Dwight Simmons, were still alive from that patrol unit. Dwight was in a nursing home in Mobile, advanced dementia. Coincidence? Probably. But it made me think about how much of Harold's paranoia might have been rooted in real experiences, real fears that had festered for 50 years. On a Thursday afternoon, I got a call from Dr. Mitchell at the VA. Harold was being discharged the next day, and he'd specifically requested that I be there. "He trusts you, Doctor," Mitchell explained. "That's not common with paranoid PTSD. Your presence would help with the transition." So, on Friday, October 30th, I arranged my shift to be available for Harold's discharge. The VA clinic looked different in daylight, less institutional and threatening than it had seemed that foggy night 2 weeks ago. Joyce was already there when I arrived, holding a tin of cookies as promised. Harold emerged from the psychiatric ward looking like a different man. He'd gained weight, his clothes were clean and pressed, and most importantly, the wild fear in his eyes had been replaced by something calmer, though still watchful. The medication and therapy had clearly helped, though I could see he was nervous about leaving the structured environment of the hospital. "Officer Barrett," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming." "Just Austin is fine, Harold. How are you feeling?" "Better? Clearer?" Dr. Mitchell says the medication is helping balance things out. The paranoia. It's still there, but quieter. Like it's behind glass now instead of screaming in my ear. Dr. Mitchell joined us, carrying a folder of discharge papers. Harold's made excellent progress. We've got him on a regimen that's working well, and he'll have weekly therapy sessions here at the clinic. The important thing is maintaining the routine and taking the medication consistently. "I want to apologize," Harold said suddenly, looking at all of us, "for the trouble I caused, for making you come out in the middle of the night, for being difficult." "You have nothing to apologize for," Joyce said firmly. "You were sick, Harold. No different than if you'd had a heart attack or the stroke. You needed help, and you got it. We drove back to Harold's house in a small convoy, just like we'd left 2 weeks ago. Harold rode with me this time in the front seat, watching the familiar countryside roll by. The October trees were in full autumn colors now, the hills painted in browns and golds, and the occasional flash of red from a maple. "I've been thinking," Harold said as we turned onto County Road 73, "about that night, about what I put you through. You could have just hauled me out, involuntary commitment, but you didn't. That wouldn't have helped you, Harold. You needed to choose to get help, not be forced into it. Still, not many cops would have spent hours talking to a paranoid old veteran. You treated me like a person, not a problem. You are a person, Harold. A person who served his country and deserved patience and respect." When we reached his house, Harold sat in the car for a moment just looking at it. "Looks the same," he said, surprised. "Joyce has been taking care of it. Your neighbor is good people. The best," he agreed. Inside, Joyce had cleaned everything, but left Harold's obsessive organization intact. She understood that disrupting his system too much might be triggering. The maps were still on the walls, the supplies still stacked in the bedroom, but the salt lines had been swept away and the aluminum foil removed from the windows. "I'll leave these for you to deal with when you're ready," Joyce said, gesturing at the maps and logs. "No rush." Harold nodded, walking through his house slowly, reacquainting himself with his space. When he reached the bedroom where I'd found him, he stopped. I remember being so certain they were coming. It felt completely real. "It was real to you," I said. "That's what matters. Dr. Mitchell says it might happen again, the paranoia, even with medication. Stress can trigger it. Then we'll deal with it if it does." "You've got support now, Harold. You're not alone." Over the next few weeks, I made a point of stopping by Harold's place during my patrols. Not officially, just as a friend checking in. He was doing well, maintaining his medication, attending his therapy sessions. The maps came down gradually, replaced by photos of Linda and his old Army unit. The survival supplies were donated to a local food bank, except for a reasonable emergency kit. Then, on a cold November evening about a month after Harold's discharge, I got another call that would change everything. It was dispatch, but not with a typical call. "Unit 19, we have a request for you specifically at 2847 County Road 73. Resident says it's urgent, but not an emergency. Harold." I immediately headed to his house, wondering if he was having another episode. But when I arrived, I found Harold and Joyce on the porch, both looking concerned, but not panicked. "Austin, thank God," Harold said. "We need to show you something." They led me inside to Harold's kitchen table, where a laptop computer sat open. I was surprised. Harold hadn't struck me as the computer type. "Joyce has been teaching me to use the internet," Harold explained. "Said it would be good for me to connect with other veterans, support groups and such." But I found something else. On the screen was a website for Vietnam veterans, specifically those who'd served in Laos and Cambodia during the secret operations. There was a memorial page for soldiers who died under suspicious circumstances after returning home. "Look at this," Harold said, pointing to a list of names. "My whole unit is on here. Everyone who was there that night in November 1969. The list included the men I'd found in my own research, plus others. Next to each name was a date and cause of death. Sergeant Blackwater's hunting accident. Private First Class Tommy Rodriguez, car accident. Specialist Michael Parks, suicide. Corporal Dennis Washington, overdose. And at the bottom, 2 names without death dates, Harold Pritchard and Dwight Simmons. "Harold, this could just be—" "There's more," he interrupted, clicking to another page. It was a scanned document, partially declassified, from 1970. Operation Blackwater was mentioned, though most of the text was redacted. But what was visible confirmed Harold's story. A patrol unit had witnessed an unauthorized meeting between U.S. intelligence assets and NVA officers. "I wasn't imagining it," Harold said quietly. "It happened. We saw what we weren't supposed to see." Joyce looked worried. "Harold, this doesn't mean someone's actually after you." "No," he agreed. My paranoia was still paranoia, but it was built on something real. The fear, the feeling of being watched, it came from somewhere true. I studied the website more carefully. It was maintained by a journalist named Thomas Morrison, who'd been investigating suspicious deaths among Vietnam veterans for years. He was a veteran himself, Air Force reconnaissance, and had lost friends to similar mysterious circumstances. There was a contact form, and Harold had already filled it out. "Harold, are you sure you want to pursue this? I need to know the truth, Austin. Was my unit targeted? Were my friends murdered to keep them quiet? I owe it to them to find out. This could trigger another episode. The stress, I know. Dr. Mitchell and I have talked about it, but I can't live my whole life afraid of my own mind. And now I have support, I have medication, I have people who will help me stay grounded. 2 days later, Morrison called Harold back. He was excited to find another surviving witness and wanted to interview Harold. The interview took place at Harold's house, with Joyce and me present at Harold's request. Morrison was professional, respectful, and clearly knowledgeable about the shadow operations of Vietnam. He was in his 60s, gray-haired, with the bearing of someone who'd seen too much but hadn't let it break him. Harold told his story calmly, matter-of-factly, without the paranoid edge that had consumed him before. He spoke about that night in November 1969, about seeing American intelligence officers meeting with NVA commanders, about the executed POWs, about 50 years of living with the secret. "You're the first living witness to confirm this operation," Morrison said. "The documents I have are so redacted they're almost useless, but your account fills in the gaps." "What do you think happened to my unit?" Harold asked. Morrison was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I can't prove anything, but the pattern is suspicious. 7 men from one 8-man patrol, all dead within 15 years of returning home, most from accidents or suicides. Statistically, that's highly improbable. So, someone did kill them, or someone was very interested in making sure they never talked about what they saw. The CIA was running a lot of black operations in that area, things that would have been highly illegal and politically devastating if exposed." Harold nodded slowly, processing this. I watched him carefully for signs of paranoid thinking, but he seemed to be handling it well. The medication and therapy had given him the tools to separate real concerns from delusional ones. "Mr. Pritchard," Morrison said, "I'd like to write about this. Not just your story, but the whole unit's story. Would you be willing to share more details?" Harold looked at Joyce, then at me. We both nodded encouragingly. "Yes," Harold said, "but I want the families of my unit members to know first. They deserve to hear it from me, not read it in some magazine." Over the next week, Harold and I tracked down the families of his deceased unit members. Some were easy to find, others required help from Morrison's research network. Harold called each one personally, explaining what he'd witnessed, what he believed had happened to their loved ones. The responses varied. Some families were grateful for answers after decades of questions. Others were angry that Harold had kept silent for so long. A few didn't believe him at all, preferring to think their loved ones' deaths were just tragic accidents. Tommy Rodriguez's widow, Maria, now in her 70s and living in Texas, had the strongest reaction. "Tommy was different after he came back," she said over the phone. "Paranoid, always looking over his shoulder. He said he'd seen something he shouldn't have, but he'd never tell me what. The night before he died, he called me from a payphone, said he loved me and the kids, said if anything happened to him, it wasn't an accident. The next day, his car went off a bridge. No skid marks, no mechanical problems. Just drove straight off." Michael Park's sister had a similar story. Michael was going to testify about something. He'd contacted a congressman, said he had information about illegal operations in Vietnam. 2 days before his meeting, he supposedly overdosed. But Michael didn't use drugs. "Never had, never would. He was murdered. I've always known it." These conversations took a toll on Harold. Each one brought back memories. Survivor's guilt, the weight of being the only one left who could tell the truth. But he persevered, determined to honor his fallen comrades. One evening, as we sat on his back porch watching the sunset, Harold showed me something he'd been keeping secret. It was a small notebook, weathered and worn, hidden in a false bottom of an old ammunition box. I wrote down everything, he said, opening it to reveal pages of neat handwriting. Names, dates, locations. Every detail I could remember about that night and what happened after. I thought if they killed me, at least there'd be evidence. The notebook was incredibly detailed. Harold had documented not just the operation, but strange occurrences afterward. Unmarked cars following him, phone calls with no one on the line, encounters with men asking questions about his service. It read like the paranoid delusions I'd found him experiencing. Except these entries were from the 1970s and 80s, long before his recent breakdown. Harold, this is evidence of systematic harassment, possibly stalking. Why didn't you report it? To who? The same government that was doing it? Besides, they were subtle. Never enough to prove anything. Just enough to remind me they were watching. I thought about all the veterans I'd encountered over the years, men and women who seemed paranoid, who claimed the government was watching them. How many of them had real reasons for their fear? Morrison's article was published 3 weeks after his interview with Harold. It appeared in a national veterans magazine with a circulation of over 100,000. The headline read, "The Last Witness, a Vietnam Veteran's 50-Year Secret." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Harold's phone, Joyce had finally convinced him to get one, rang constantly. Other veterans wanted to share similar stories. Journalists wanted follow-ups, and surprisingly, a lawyer from Washington, D.C. wanted to discuss potential legal action. The lawyer's name was Patricia Lawson, and she specialized in government accountability cases. She flew down to Montgomery to meet with Harold, bringing with her a team of researchers who'd been investigating similar cases for years. "Mr. Pritchard," Lawson said as we sat in Harold's living room, "what happened to your unit wasn't an isolated incident. We've documented at least 12 similar cases, units that witnessed classified operations, followed by suspicious deaths of unit members. Yours is the first where we have a living witness willing to testify." "Testify?" Harold asked nervously. "In court? Potentially. We could file a civil suit against the CIA and other agencies involved. Wrongful death for your unit members, conspiracy to commit murder, violation of civil rights. The statute of limitations is complex for cases like this, but there are exceptions for ongoing conspiracies and cover-ups." Harold was quiet for a long moment. I could see him weighing the options, the potential danger against the possibility of justice. "What would I need to do?" "First, we'd need all your documentation. The notebook you've kept, any photographs, letters, anything that corroborates your account. Then we'd file in federal court, probably in the District of Columbia. It would be a long process, possibly years, and you'd likely face intense scrutiny, possibly harassment." "I've faced that for 50 years already," Harold said. "What's a few more?" But then he paused, looking at Joyce. She'd become such an important part of his life, his anchor to normalcy. "This would affect you too," he said to her. "They might come after you to get to me." Joyce took his hand, her expression determined. "Harold Pritchard, I've been your neighbor for 20 years. I've seen you at your worst and helped bring you back. I'm not abandoning you now." I felt I had to interject with a warning. "Harold, if you do this, if you file this lawsuit, you're painting a target on your back. The paranoia you experienced might become justified. Are you prepared for that?" "Austin, I spent 2 weeks barricaded in my bedroom, terrified of shadows. I nearly died from fear. If there's a chance that my unit's families can get justice, that the truth can finally come out, isn't that worth the risk?" Only you can answer that. Harold made his decision that night. He would pursue the lawsuit, but carefully, with security measures in place. Lawson's firm would provide protection if needed, and I promised to increase my patrols past his house. As we prepared for what would likely be a long legal battle, Harold seemed more at peace than I'd ever seen him. The secret that had poisoned his life for 50 years was finally in the open. Whether justice would follow remained to be seen, but at least the truth was no longer his burden to carry alone. "You know what Linda would say?" Harold asked me one evening as we went through his documentation with Lawson's team. "What's that?" "She'd say it's about damn time. She always knew I was carrying something heavy, always encouraged me to let it go. I just wish she was here to see this." "She'd be proud of you, Harold." "I hope so. I really hope so." The investigation was expanding rapidly. Lawson's team had found patterns in the deaths, connections to known CIA operations, even evidence of a specific unit within the agency tasked with maintaining operational security regarding classified Vietnam operations. Harold's testimony would be crucial, but it was dangerous territory we were entering. As autumn turned toward winter, as the leaves fell and the nights grew longer, Harold prepared for the biggest battle of his life. Not against the NVA in a jungle 50 years ago, but against his own government in a courtroom. The paranoid veteran I'd found that October night was becoming something else. A witness, an advocate, a seeker of truth. The welfare check that had started as a routine call had become something much larger. Harold's story was no longer just about one man's mental health crisis. It was about systematic murder, government cover-ups, and the price of keeping dangerous secrets. And I, a simple state trooper who'd just been trying to help an elderly veteran, found myself deep in the middle of it all. The journalist who'd interviewed Harold was named Thomas Morrison. No relation to me, just one of those coincidences that happen. He was a Vietnam veteran himself, had served in the Air Force running reconnaissance flights over Laos. His interest in Harold's story wasn't just professional, it was personal. He'd lost friends to mysterious accidents after the war, too. Morrison's article about Harold and Operation Blackwater was published 3 weeks after the interview in a national veterans magazine. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Harold's phone, Joyce had convinced him to finally get one, rang constantly. Other veterans wanted to share their stories. Journalists wanted follow-ups, and surprisingly, a lawyer from Washington, D.C., wanted to discuss potential legal action. "Legal action?" Harold asked when he told me about the call. We were sitting in his living room, which had been transformed from the paranoid bunker I'd first seen into something more normal. Family photos had replaced the tactical maps, though Harold still kept one map of the local area on the wall. "For emergencies," he said with a self-aware smile. "The lawyer says there might be grounds for a civil suit," Harold explained. "Against the CIA, or whoever was responsible for the systematic elimination of my unit. Wrongful death, conspiracy, violation of civil rights." "Harold, that's a dangerous path to go down. These people, if they're still around, they've proven they're willing to kill to protect their secrets." "I know. That's why I wanted to talk to you about it. And there's something else." He pulled out a manila envelope, weathered and old. "I've been holding on to this for 50 years. Never told anyone about it, not even Linda." Inside the envelope were photographs. Black and white, grainy, but clear enough to see what they depicted. American soldiers shaking hands with NVA officers, money changing hands. And in the background of one photo, bodies. American soldiers by their uniforms, lying in rows. "Jesus, Harold, you've had evidence this whole time." took them with my personal camera. Sergeant Blackwater didn't know. I developed them myself when I got back to base. Hid them ever since. I was too scared to show anyone. Thought they'd kill me immediately if they knew these existed. Why show me now? Because I'm 74 years old, Austin. If they want to kill me, they better hurry up. And because I trust you. You saved my life. And more importantly, you gave me back my dignity when everyone else would have written me off as a crazy old vet. I studied the photographs more carefully. They were damning, no question. But they were also 50 years old, and proving their authenticity would be challenging. Harold, if you go public with these, there's no going back. Your quiet life here will be over. My quiet life almost killed me. Maybe it's time for some noise. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Harold's lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Lawson, who specialized in government accountability cases, flew down from D.C. to examine the photographs. She brought with her a forensic photography expert who confirmed the images were authentic, taken with a camera model common in 1969, showing no signs of manipulation. "Mr. Pritchard," Lawson said after reviewing everything, "these photographs, combined with your testimony and the suspicious deaths of your unit members, constitute significant evidence of government misconduct. We can file this case, but I need you to understand the risks." "I understand, but I need to do this. For Blackwater, Rodriguez, Parks, Washington, all of them. They deserve justice, even if it's 50 years late." The lawsuit was filed in federal court on January 15, 2021. Harold Pritchard versus United States Government, Central Intelligence Agency, and unknown persons. It made national news immediately. Vietnam vet sues CIA over unit's mysterious deaths, read the headlines. The response was swift. Within days, Harold's house was under surveillance again. This time, it wasn't subtle. Black SUVs parked openly on County Road 73, men in suits photographing everyone who visited Harold. They wanted him to know he was being watched, wanted him to be afraid. But Harold had changed since that October night I'd found him. The medication kept his paranoia manageable, and having Joyce, me, and now a legal team supporting him made him feel less alone. He responded to the surveillance by sitting on his porch each morning, waving at the SUVs while drinking his coffee. "Let them watch," he told me. "I've got nothing to hide anymore." The preliminary hearings were held in Montgomery. I attended when I could, sitting in the gallery as Harold testified about that night in 1969, about the systematic deaths of his unit, about 50 years of living in fear. He was calm, articulate, and credible. The photographs were entered into evidence, despite government lawyers arguing they were inadmissible due to their age and unclear provenance. Then, in February, Dwight Simmons, Jr. called Harold with urgent news. His father had died in the night, but not before having one final moment of clarity. The nurses had recorded it on video at Dwight Jr.'s request. In the video, Dwight Sr. was propped up in his hospital bed, eyes clear for the first time in months. "Harold Pritchard is telling the truth," he said clearly. "November 12, 1969. We saw American intelligence officers execute 3 POWs who'd witnessed the weapons deal. Sergeant Blackwater took photographs. I saw him do it. They killed our unit to keep us quiet. Harold and I are the last ones left, and I'm dying. The truth needs to be told." He passed away 2 hours after making the recording. The video changed everything. Here was corroborating testimony from another witness, recorded on his deathbed, traditionally given special weight in legal proceedings. The government's lawyers asked for a continuance to review this new evidence. During the break-in proceedings, Harold received a visitor at his house. I was there when the man arrived, tall, gray-haired, wearing an expensive suit but looking haggard. He introduced himself as Robert Sterling, retired CIA, though he showed no official identification. "Mr. Pritchard, I'm here unofficially to discuss your case." "Unofficially?" Harold asked. "Then officially get off my property. Please, just hear me out. What happened to your unit was wrong. It was a different time, different rules, but it was still wrong. The men responsible are all dead now. Natural causes mostly. There's no one left to punish." "Then why are you here?" Sterling sighed, suddenly looking much older. "Because the secrets you're exposing go beyond your unit. That operation you witnessed was part of something much larger. If this goes to trial, if all the evidence comes out, it won't just be ancient history being exposed. Current operations, current assets could be compromised. That's not my problem," Harold said firmly. "No, but it could become your problem. The agency has long memories and longer reaches. Even retired, even discredited, we protect our own." "Is that a threat?" I asked, my hand moving instinctively toward my service weapon. Sterling looked at me with tired eyes. "No, Officer Barrett. It's a reality. I'm here to offer Mr. Pritchard a settlement. Full admission of wrongdoing, sealed records, and substantial compensation for the families of his deceased unit members. All he has to do is drop the public lawsuit." "How substantial?" Harold asked. $5 million per family. $50 million total, including you and Dwight Simmons' estate." It was a staggering amount. Harold was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him wrestling with the decision. "I need to think about it," he finally said. "You have 48 hours. After that, the offer is withdrawn, and the full weight of the United States government's legal team will be brought to bear. You're a brave man, Mr. Pritchard, but bravery won't win against unlimited resources." After Sterling left, Harold, Joyce, and I sat in Harold's kitchen, the same table where he'd shown me the photographs months earlier. $50 million, Joyce said quietly. "That could help a lot of families." "But it would also bury the truth forever," Harold countered. "Sealed records mean no one ever learns what really happened." "Harold," I said carefully, "you've already won in a way. You've proven you weren't paranoid, that your unit was murdered. The CIA just essentially admitted it. Maybe that's enough. Is it? What about the next unit that sees something they shouldn't? What about accountability?" We talked long into the night, going over the options. Harold called Patricia Lawson, who advised him that the settlement offer was probably the best outcome he could hope for. The government had infinite resources for legal battles and could tie this up in court for years. Harold also called the families of his deceased unit members, the ones he could find. Most were grateful for any acknowledgement of what had happened to their loved ones. They'd spent decades wondering about the suspicious deaths, and now they had answers. Rodriguez's widow, now in her 70s, cried when Harold told her about the settlement offer. "Tommy always said something would happen to him because of what he saw." I thought it was the PTSD talking. To know he was right, that he was murdered. It doesn't bring him back, but at least I know. In the end, it was Dwight Jr. who helped Harold make his decision. "My father spent his last years in terror and confusion," he said when Harold called him. But in his final moment he found clarity and courage to tell the truth. That video, his testimony, that's his legacy. The money would help, yes. But having his story officially acknowledged, even in sealed records, that matters more. Harold made his decision. He would accept the settlement, but with conditions. The records would be sealed for 25 years, not permanently. After that, they would be released to the National Archives. The truth would eventually come out, just not immediately. the government agreed, probably figuring that in 25 years anyone who might be implicated would be long dead. Officer checking on a welfare case. Harold had become something of a local celebrity, the veteran who'd stood up to the CIA and won. People would stop him at the grocery store to shake his hand, to thank him for his service and his courage. But the stress of everything had taken its toll. In June 2021, Harold had a mild heart attack. I was actually on patrol nearby when the call came in and was first on scene. I found him conscious but in pain, Joyce already by his side. "Guess my heart couldn't take any more excitement," he said weakly as I helped the paramedics load him onto the stretcher. He recovered, but the doctor was clear. He needed to avoid stress, take it easy. Harold laughed at that. "Doc, I spent 50 years stressed about keeping a secret, then a year stressed about revealing it. I don't think I know how to not be stressed." But he tried. He took up gardening, growing tomatoes and peppers in raised beds he built himself. He taught Joyce how to play chess, something Linda had taught him years ago. He even got a dog, a calm old Labrador from the shelter he named Buck after Sergeant Blackwater. "He deserves to be remembered for more than how he died," Harold explained. In October 2021, exactly 1 year after I'd found him in crisis, Harold organized a memorial service for his unit. It was held at the Veterans Cemetery in Montgomery, with a marker placed for each member who'd died. The families came, some meeting for the first time, sharing stories about their loved ones. Morrison, the journalist, attended and wrote a follow-up article about the service. This time, the focus wasn't on the conspiracy or the deaths, but on the lives these men had lived, the families they'd left behind, the price of keeping dangerous secrets. I gave a short speech at Harold's request, talking about the night I'd found him and the journey he'd taken since then. "Harold Pritchard taught me that paranoia and vigilance are separated by a thin line," I said. "That trauma doesn't diminish with time unless it's addressed, and that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is ask for help." The years that followed were good ones for Harold. The heart attack had been a wake-up call, and he took better care of himself. He traveled some, visiting the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, where he left photos of his unit at the wall. He reconnected with distant relatives, building family connections he'd avoided for decades. Joyce and Harold grew closer, their relationship evolving from concerned neighbors to best friends to something more. They never married. "At our age, why complicate things?" Harold said. But they were partners in every way that mattered. In 2023, Harold's health began declining more seriously. His heart was weakening, and his kidneys were starting to fail. He was in and out of the hospital, but remained mentally sharp and emotionally stable. The PTSD that had nearly killed him never fully returned, held at bay by medication, therapy, and the support system he'd built. During one of his hospital stays, he asked me to bring him something from his house, a sealed envelope from his desk drawer. Inside was a letter addressed to me. "Not to read now," he said, "or after. But I wanted to make sure you got it." On a cool October morning in 2024, almost exactly 4 years after that welfare check, Joyce called me. Harold had passed peacefully in his sleep, Buck the dog by his side. He was 78 years old. His funeral was held at the same Baptist church where he and Linda had been married. The place was packed. Veterans, neighbors, the families of his unit members, people whose lives he'd touched in his final years. Morrison gave a eulogy about Harold's courage in exposing the truth. Joyce spoke about his kindness and resilience. Dwight Jr. read his father's final testimony, officially entering it into the public record. I read the letter Harold had left me. "Austin, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. Hopefully, peacefully, and not barricaded in my bedroom thinking the communists are coming through the walls." I wanted to thank you one more time for that night in October 2020. You saved my life, but more than that, you saved my soul. I spent 50 years as a prisoner of my own mind, afraid of shadows both real and imagined. You helped me see that while the danger was real, it didn't have to define my life. You treated me with dignity when I had none left, with patience when I deserved frustration, with kindness when the world had been cruel. The truth about Operation Blackwater will come out eventually. The sealed records will be opened, and people will know what happened. But that's not my legacy. My legacy is the lesson that it's never too late to get help, never too late to tell the truth, never too late to find peace. Take care of Joyce for me. She's tougher than she looks, but she'll miss having someone to fuss over. Keep doing what you do, Austin. Every welfare check, every traffic stop, Chess set with a note. He'd want you to have this. Teach your children. Tell them about the importance of making the right move, even when you're afraid. I still patrol County Road 73, though I'm getting close to retirement myself now. Harold's house has new owners, a young family who doesn't know the full story of what happened there. But sometimes, when I drive past at night and see the porch light on, I remember that October evening when I responded to a welfare check that became so much more. The Alabama countryside hasn't changed much. The same winding roads, the same thick forests, the same isolated houses where people go to escape or hide. But I see it differently now. Behind every door might be a Harold Pritchard, someone struggling with demons, keeping dangerous secrets, fighting battles that started decades ago. I train new troopers now, and I always tell them about Harold. Not the classified details, not the conspiracy, but the human story. The story of a veteran whose paranoia was rooted in reality, whose fear was both protective and destructive, who needed help but was too proud to ask for it until it almost killed him. Every welfare check matters, I tell them. You're not just checking if someone's alive. You're checking if they're really living. And sometimes, with patience and compassion, you can help them find their way back from whatever darkness has claimed them. Last month, the Department of Defense quietly announced a review of all suspicious deaths among Vietnam veterans between 1970 and 1990. Harold's case, though sealed, had triggered something. Perhaps in time, other families will get answers about their loved ones' mysterious deaths. Thomas Morrison wrote a book about Operation Blackwater and its aftermath. He dedicated it to Harold and his unit, calling them the men who kept a terrible secret until it destroyed them, and the one who survived to tell the truth. Dr. Mitchell, Harold's psychiatrist from the VA, still uses Harold's case in his teaching, with identifying details removed. It shows that paranoia doesn't exist in a vacuum, he tells his students. Sometimes it's an extreme response to real trauma and real danger. Our job isn't to dismiss it, but to help patients separate the real from the imagined and cope with both. The support group Harold attended created an annual award in his name, given to the veteran who shows the most courage in confronting their trauma. The first recipient said in his acceptance speech, "Harold Pritchard showed us that you can be paranoid and still be right, that you can be afraid and still be brave, that you can be broken and still be whole." As I write this final report, sitting in the same diner where Harold and I used to meet for coffee, I'm struck by how one welfare check changed so many lives. Harold's story touched hundreds of people. Veterans who found courage to seek help, families who finally got answers about their loved ones, and one state trooper who learned that sometimes the most important part of the job isn't enforcing the law, but simply being human. The fog still rolls in on October evenings, making the highways treacherous and turning familiar roads strange. When it does, I think of that night, approaching Harold's house not knowing what I'd find. I think of the smell of fear and chemicals, the maps on the walls, the photographs hidden for 50 years, and the terrified veteran who just needed someone to see him as more than his disease. Harold Pritchard died free. Free from the paranoia that had imprisoned him. Free from the secrets that had poisoned him. Free from the fear that had isolated him. He died surrounded by friends, his truth told, his unit honored, his life redeemed. That's the final entry in the welfare check of Harold Pritchard. Case closed, but never forgotten. Because every time I respond to a welfare check now, every time I encounter someone in crisis, I carry Harold's lesson with me. That inside every person, barricaded by fear, might be someone worth saving. A story worth hearing, a truth worth telling. The highways of Alabama stretch on into the darkness, endless and winding. I patrol them still, older now, wiser perhaps, certainly more aware of the hidden battles being fought behind closed doors. And sometimes on quiet nights when the radio is silent and the road is empty, I think I can feel Harold riding along, reminding me to see the person, not the problem, to offer dignity in the face of indignity, to never give up on someone just because they've given up on themselves. That's Harold's true legacy, not the conspiracy he exposed or the settlement he won, but the reminder that every person deserves compassion, every story deserves to be heard, and every welfare check might be an opportunity to save not just a life, but a soul. Rest in peace, Harold Pritchard. Your watch is over, your truth is told, and your lesson lives on in every welfare check I'll ever make.